Inside BBI with John and Eric begins now.
Oh, the glory days of the 86 New York Giants. Welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt. With me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. But on the screen, you see three of us as we've got the legendary, known as on BBI, Larry in Pennsylvania, who is a Giants historian. We've done this before. We went over, I believe it was the 2000 season we did before.
This is known as True Blue Larry.
True Blue Larry. Oh,
and I'm in Delaware.
So never mind.
There are along the east. The last time you had me on, I was still in Connecticut. So, I'm a man on the move. But I'm outside my comfort. I'm outside my comfort zone.
It's Kid Chicago who fought out of Phoenix. So there we go. So here we are. That's a great way to start off. The drinks are flowing. We've got drinks. So I'll start off. I'll do my own explanation here. It's a mixed drink tonight. I went with it's a Fresca mixed with a little ice and a little from I believe it's the Weldon Mills Distillery. It is a caramel green apple whiskey and two fresh mint leaves off our own little mint plant out back. I took them just today after a major thunderstorm. Just amazingly good. So that's what I'm having.
4th of July is coming up, so I have Freedom Brew, veteran-owned, mission-driven.
Nice. Nice.
And in deference to the Mara family, when I'm on Inside BBI with John and Eric, I go Irish. So I'm starting Guinness, and then on the bench, we have Harp.
Nice.
Yes, love Harp.
All Irish.
So for those who don't know, we've been talking about this for a while. We wanted to look back. It's the 40th anniversary this year of the Giants' 86 Super Bowl team. Hard to believe. It's 40 years. Whew. Yeah, I was 16 when the season started. So that tells you a little bit. It was my senior year of high school. But so we're gonna do the season, but we want to we'll take a look a little bit on the backside of it or the front side, I suppose, backside of 85. Kind of talk just quickly about that leading in. We're gonna break down the season and stuff, but we have a lot because between the three of us, I mean, this is our wheelhouse really of a time frame that we grew up in. This was big for us for that piece of it. So I'll start, Eric. I'll start real quick with you. First off, how you been, bud? It's been a week since we've last talked. So how's everything going? And here we are talking about something that's so feel good for the Giants.
It's just strangely odd, weird, whatever you want to say, because I just was in upstate New York in my hometown where I graduated in 1986. So it's been 40 years, and I happened to be there and driving around in the old memories. But 86 was the year I graduated from high school. It was my first year in college, and my college was in Washington, D.C., and we played the Redskins 3 times in 1986. So it was a very big deal for me, not just the Super Bowl, but to be in enemy territory with the Washington Redskin fans who had and I will make this argument when we're on doing this show that the Redskins were the most serious threat to the New York Giants that season. I strongly feel that the Redskins were the second best team in the NFL that year. I didn't want to see the Bears again because of the year before what they did to us, but I really did feel the Redskins were. So this year is a special year to me because it was the Giants' first Super Bowl. I didn't go through all the pain and agony my father and mother did growing up as Giants fans, but their sort of angst, I sort of was handed down to me. So I didn't have that 30-year, pain thing, but I was raised in this belief that the Super Bowl is something the Giants would never be able to accomplish. Other teams go to the Super Bowl. The Giants don't even get a whiff of anything like that. And so it was really a special year just because, again, I graduated, I went to college, I was in enemy territory, and then they went on this miraculous, marvelous run, and it was kind of all brought home just coincidentally because I was home in that town this past week, and it just was weird, the timing of all of this.
Yeah, so you said one thing that I'll just add to real quick is that there's you talk about it all the time. Is sports is different and football is different in terms of like the fans that come in now. So people that are we were then, our age then, the fans now, they don't stay with teams if they're losing. They don't stick with. It's not like the lovable Red Sox fan for the years and they never won and it was like, oh, you haven't won since 1919 or whatever.
Right.
And nobody sticks with the teams anymore. There's so many things you're inundated with right now kind of stuff that it's not the same. We went through year after year. There'd be some seasons they win. I still remember fondly 1980, the Giants beating the Cowboys 38-35. And that was a big deal to me, even though they sucked that year.
Yeah.
But it meant something as a fan. You don't get that with people today. It's different. They just don't. There's too many other things that they can be doing. And just you got so many things at the immediate touch. You just don't have that. So to go through that and get to that point, get to where, oh my God, we are a good team. Like we're one of the best. Yeah, it was such a different feeling. And I know, Larry, you've got a plethora of knowledge and facts and things like that, but you also have that personal feeling and connection to that season as well.
I do. And like Eric, I graduated high school in 1986. It was my freshman year of college, although I went, I grew up I lived in Putnam Valley and I grew up, I went to school in northern Westchester County. I was in the tri-state area and I grew up with Giant season tickets. My grandfather first got them in the early 1960s when they were still playing at the old Yankee Stadium. And I would go to the games with my father and my sisters, and he would tell us about Y.A. Tittle and Frank Gifford. And his favorite player of all time was Sam Huff. And so, and I knew I was young. I was kind of aware of, the 70s and the fumble. I really became a real fan in 1979, where I would sit in front of the TV every Sunday and I never missed a game. And I used to read the newspaper and I would follow the players. So and even in the, 81, they made the playoffs. There was still that stigma of the fumble and the 18 years of lousy football and the airplane and the burning of tickets. And even, they started winning wild card games and it was fun. But like Eric said, like the Giants don't go to the Super Bowl. That's for the Cowboys and the Steelers and the Dolphins. Like the Giants are this, lower level team. And it was really, it felt too good to be true. It was amazing.
It's funny too that you mentioned the 81 season, and it was a change, right? It was a change, and we know what that change was. That change was LT arrived, and that kind of changed a lot of things. But the Jets were good then. The Jets were a decent winning team. They ended up playing in championship games. They were right there, and there was talk even going to 84, like, oh, we might eventually have an all New York Super Bowl kind of thing, and then the franchises went a different direction. But in 81, the Giants, even though they were better and were coming back for that season, they were still almost second tier in the greater New York area, we'll say.
Yeah. Well, there was that great Sports Illustrated cover with Lawrence Taylor and Mark Gastineau that said, in New York, the Jets are always the second. In the Big Apple, the Jets are always the second banana. But one of the really, really fascinating sidebars to the 86 season where the Jets were really good. And they were 10-1. They had the best record in the NFL at that point. And I was going through the newspapers doing my prep for this, and there was a lot of columnists, New York Super Bowl, Subway Super Bowl, and a lot of people felt they were on a collision course. The Jets had a bunch of injuries, especially on their defense, that kind of derailed that whole thing. But they still made it and they won a wild card game. But that in the middle of the season, the New York newspapers, it was Mets mania. Everything was Mets, and you had the Jets and the Giants. When they were struggling in September and October, they were winning close games. They were winning ugly. The offense was really struggling, and they were kind of below the radar. And I think that sort of helped their cause.
It's kind of funny that that whole thing. You're talking Mets. I was a Red Sox fan, so it was and so that 86. Now, caveat: I'm a Giants fan and a football fan before anything else, regardless. Even if I have a favorite team in another sport, if there's a football game on, I'm watching the football game. I'm not watching the team. It's just the way that it's always been. But to have the Red Sox choke in that game, well, I'm like, well, at least the Giants are winning. So that which was good. But all right, so let's kick it off. Let's kind of take it from the end of 85 a little bit, because a lot of people who might be too young or don't really remember, they know the Giants won the Super Bowl in 86, but kind of don't know the way the 85 season ended and where things were. So let's take it from there. And I don't know if Eric or Larry, you want to start it off.
Well, the thing I will say, I'll let Larry handle this, is the 85 season personally to me was bittersweet, because there were so many painful losses that year, and the two that stand out me I think almost every loss they had was extremely painful, but the two that stood out to me were the two to the Cowboys, because they had both those. They had the first game won, and they fumbled a snap at the end of the game that cost them the game, and then they were going to probably win the division. They were controlling the game in Dallas in the first half, and there was a fluke play, almost reminiscent of the George Martin play that we're going to talk about. But Too Tall Jones batted a ball up in the air, and Jim Jeffcoat carried it back. And I remember as being as devastated as I've ever been as a Giants fan after that game, that game in 85, because they would have won the division, and that was a good football team. And then, I want to leave it to Larry to piggyback on that and talk about the Bears and the playoff game. But yeah, I think Larry and I talked before that the loudest we ever heard Giants Stadium was that 85 49er was the 49er Giants playoff game, right? Didn't we talk about that?
I was there. I contributed to that noise. Yeah. The 85 Giants were really good. And that was, my first season as a fan, where I felt like every week they should win. Prior to that, even in 81 and 84, when they were pretty good, and I would hope they would win, and there would be some weeks I'm like, it's going to be tough. But like in 85, every Sunday going in, I expected the Giants to win. They were 10-6. Their 6 losses totaled 20 points. They were all close games. And aside from the 2 Cowboy games, the home game against the Browns was a wretched loss. And I was there for that game.
The Bengals game was painful.
The Bengal game. I mean, Phil Simms threw for 500 yards. Mark Bavaro had an incredible game.
176
turnovers. And the Packers game, they should have. The Packers were a bad team. The Giants should have won. But that was their bugaboo. They were good, but mental errors. They beat themselves. The only blowout loss, and it really wasn't a blowout until the fourth quarter, was the playoff game to the Bears.
Right.
They lost 21-0. But it was 7-0 going in, and the Giants could have had points at halftime. Eric Schubert missed a field goal just before the half, and they were inside the 5-yard line. It could have been 7-7. It could have been 7-3. But you get behind the Bears and that team, and the second half they just ran it. And it's just tough to move the ball on that defense.
And the only thing I'll throw out too, because I know Larry wants to talk about it in terms of the training camp too, is in 84 the Giants they tried to run the football and they couldn't. And they kept trying, but they were really a passing team. But Joe Morris's 85 season was a breakout year, and Butch Woolfolk was drafted above Joe Morris. And he was supposed to be the guy, but it ended up being little Joe Morris, this 5'7" running back out of Syracuse. And I still remember the game. Everyone thinks about him breaking his leg, LT breaking Theismann's leg and all that. But I remember Joe Morris going crazy that night going, oh my God, where did this come from? And then from the rest of the season, it seemed like every week or every other week, Joe Morris was breaking off like a 60-yard touchdown run, sometimes even without a shoe on in like the Steelers game.
The Steelers game.
But the thing that Giants fans should know about the 85 season too is the Giants and Joe Morris all of a sudden became a really good running football team all of a sudden. And that really, I think, continued into the 86 season. And we'll talk about a lot of big games Joe Morris has.
He carried the team in the first half of the season.
And he had two touchdown runs in that particular game that you're talking about, 56 and 41. He had another one in close. He had 3 touchdowns in that game.
Right.
But yeah, there were so many. Again, 85 was. It's oddly when we look at different things. Me specifically, I look at what could have been an 88. Right? If we don't have that idiotic deep throw and Collins and Hill kind of knock each other off and Rice scores a touchdown, the Giants win that game. San Francisco probably doesn't even make the playoffs because of that. I mean, they were a 10-16 that made the playoffs. That started their run to potentially winning 3 Super Bowls. They might not even have been in the playoffs that year. Right. But 85 had just as many games where you could have been like, man, if that had just gone the other way, things would have flipped. And then, like you said, Larry, there were so many close games, so many just there. But, sometimes, at least back in the day when teams built over a series of years, it's a little different now. Things change very rapidly with free agency. You have to go through those things to kind of see how close are we and what do we got to do. Some teams never get past that, how close they get, and the teams that do win. And this was the season the Giants had to have those things happen, but then they did things about it to take it that next step.
Yeah, there was like a succession because the NFC was such a dominant conference in the 80s and the early 90s. And, in 84, you had the 15-1 Niners. They beat the Bears in the NFC Championship game, and they shut them out. And then in 85, it was the Bears shutting out the Giants, and the Giants built some resolve. A lot of the players and the coaches talked about the discussion they had in the locker room after that game, that they're not going to let that happen again. And then that kind of got the Giants going on their run in 86. And they beat the Redskins. Spoiler alert. And then in 87, the team that the Giants beat, the Bears won the Super Bowl in 87. And the NFC was just that powerful.
And the thing that we'd be remiss if we don't bring up, the 85 playoff game against the 49ers was gigantic for this team because they finally got that off their back, that they couldn't get past the 49ers in the playoffs because the Giants had lost in 81 to the 49ers in the playoffs. And they had lost in 84 to the 49ers in the playoffs. And the 49ers came to the Meadowlands. Larry was at that game. And it was, boy, that was loud. That was a loud stadium. And the Giants really took it to San Francisco in that game. And they got that monkey off their back. And the Bears, for those who don't remember or were too young, the Bears were just so dominant that year. And we went into that game, and the Giants were not as good as the Bears. But there's that famous quote that Parcells gives in America's Game that he said, if we played the Bears 10 times, we would have lost them 9 times. But that one time that we could have beat them was that year, was that game. And Landetta had his whiff in the end zone. And again, that comes full circle when we talk about the championship game against the Redskins the following year, where he was probably MVP of the game. But we should be remiss that, again, the Giants got the 49ers off their back with that win. And then it was, how do we get past the Bears? Because the Bears looked like they were going to prime for like a run. That looked like that Bears team looked like they were going to win 2 or 3 or 4 Super Bowls. They were so dominant that year.
And that 85 game too the Giants also did the one thing they hadn't done when they had made the playoffs a couple of times. They were always on the road. This was their first home playoff game. It gave that sense of, okay, and they won going to Chicago. That game, again, for those of us who were younger then and remember it versus those who maybe never saw them play, that game was really close early on. It was very physical. The Bears defense, you knew the Giants offense was going to have a hard time doing a whole lot against that Bears defense. But I felt pretty good about the Giants defense being able to do stuff against the Bears offense, which was a very simplistic offense. Yeah. It was limited to some very deep throws to a speedster and mainly using Walter Payton in as many different facets as they can, the running game, the receiving game, and they have some intermediary stuff, but they lived off a really good offensive line. That was their big thing. But that as the game went on, it wore down, and you just saw the difference there. But the Giants were definitely in that game for quite a while.
Yeah, they hung with it. It was 7-0 going into the fourth quarter before it went off the rails. But they were hanging in there. I mean, physically, the Giants matched up with them pretty well, but it's just tough to play catch up against them, especially, in Soldier Field in January.
Right. Right.
So here we are, with the good feeling overall, but there were some things not so great about 85 as well. We had LT had his issues during the season. You've got the off season. We've got some things going on there. So catch up a little bit on some of the off season stuff that the Giants were looking at heading out of 85 into 86.
Well, the big one was in February. It was revealed. It was kind of mysterious. The Giants were not upfront about it, but Lawrence Taylor allegedly entered a facility somewhere for something. And over several weeks, it may have been into like mini camp in April where it's true. Like you read the papers, it was mostly innuendo. And then finally,
yes.
I think it was George Young said, yes, he was somewhere like outside of Houston. And it was for some kind of substance abuse. And then, some of the writers were like, well, Lawrence Taylor might have been involved with cocaine or something, but nobody would confirm it, put it in writing. But yeah, we heard this, we heard that. But, you read between the lines and, it's probably no big surprise that, Lawrence Taylor was in a drug rehab clinic. And then he did not there was a lot of judgmental reporting, especially from the older columnists in New York that, weren't too appreciative of drug culture that was going on. Of course, the Mets were going on at this time too. And they were the poster. They were, like the Oakland Raiders of the 70s, the Mets in 1986, like they kind of took the mantle from them. So, Lawrence Taylor was not happy with the way he was treated in the press. And Bill Parcells, to his credit, really backed him up, and so did George Young. And Lawrence Taylor said, I'm boycotting. I'm not talking to any reporters this year. And he carried that through training camp and pretty much all of the regular season. It was late in December where he kind of broke that and he agreed to talk to the press. It was strictly about the games, though. He wouldn't talk about any of the off-season issues.
It makes sense, once your name is being thrown in for, possible MVP, somebody's going, dude, you got to talk to the media just a little bit.
That's right.
Just get out there.
This award, you have to talk to somebody and smile.
that whole off-season thing, again, going back to my childhood, I dealt with so many just nasty things from all my fellow friends and just schoolmates and stuff who were fans of other teams, and the Giants just make fun of the Giants and all this stuff. And that offseason led to the constant ribbing, which was, hey, did you hear that the Giants traded LT to the Bears because they want to put a Coke machine next to the refrigerator? I'm like, ha ha ha. So it was just constant. Yeah, it was just constant needling, and I'm like, Jesus, when we're good, I can't get away from some of this stuff. But yeah, it was tough. It's even harder, I think, now as an adult and as a parent to look back and know how much I idolized LT and realize how flawed the off the field stuff was. I'm really glad I did not know a lot of that stuff. But
the NFL didn't have a drug policy at that time. There was no automatic suspension. And the thinking at the time was, if you enter rehab voluntarily, you'll get a pass. But like if you fail a drug test and the NFL catches you, then you'll be up for a suspension. But because he did it voluntarily during the offseason, they kind of, let it go. They took him at his word. Okay, I'm cleaned up. I'm good.
And drugs used to be a massiad problem in the NFL too, in the late 70s and in the early 80s. And Parcells had a drug problem on that team. He had to get rid of a lot of the players after the 83 season because of that. So, and like Larry just said, there wasn't a way to deal with it. And it was just sort of, and with LT, I hate to say it, what John's talking about, that, if it would have been different today, and as parents, we probably would have looked at it differently. But back then, I don't know how to explain it, but it was almost like, well, it's LT, that's him, he's in a different tier. And that doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound fair, but it was almost kind of like, well, that's just who he is. He's in a different category. At least that's how I kind of perceive as a fan at the time. That doesn't make it right. It doesn't make me, it's not a good look for me personally to say, well, that's just LT. I tried to explain that to my daughter because she was asking me, if she should get a Lawrence Taylor jersey. And I had to try to explain to her, well, LT was great, but he had his demons too. And she said, what are you talking about? And I had explained that to her. And she was like, oh my God, that's terrible. And I tried to tell her, like, and it didn't make me look good or sound good, but it's like, well, it was LT, it just comes with the package. That's who he is. And it doesn't sound good, but that's just the way it was back then.
I mean, at least you didn't want a Dave Meggett jersey, so we're good there. So we're good there.
Well, we were driving up from Maryland, and she goes, Towson State, and all I could think was Dave Meggett. And she goes, who's Dave Meggett? Oh, you want to hear bad? Let me tell you. Anyway, that's it. We'll cover that when we do the 90s.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that whole bit, correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be. Was the Trump New Jersey Generals offer to Taylor, was that 84-85 or 85 off season?
That was between 84-85. Because that money the Giants spent buying out that contract prevented them from signing Moore and Moon.
But from that Jersey team, and Larry will correct me on this. This is where my memory, again, it's been 40 years, guys. So I could, but Maurice Carthon was on that team,
correct.
Right?
Yes.
And
yes,
so was Bart Oates, right? Or no?
Bart Oates played for the Philadelphia Stars.
Was it the Stars?
Right.
I thought it was Stars.
Yeah.
So did Sean Landeta.
Sean Landeta.
Well, he played for the Stars.
Stars, okay.
Yeah, and Chris Godfrey came from the Michigan Panthers.
Okay. I mean, technically, you could say later on we had Herschel Walker, and he was on the Generals with Maurice Carthon, and they both ran for 1,000 yards in the same season. But that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, well, the Giants would meet Herschel Walker in week 1 of the season.
We'll get to that. So. And in terms of this training camp, too, Joe Morris holdout, right? Or
the strangest holdout in NFL history, where he had that big year in '85, the first Giant back since Ron Johnson to run for 1,000 yards. He ran for 21 touchdowns, which is still at that time it was the second most in NFL history. John Riggins had 24. But it's still the Giants' record, and he wanted more money because he was still being paid as a second-round draft pick from his rookie contract. And it was the second or third day of camp. Parcells and Morris had a meeting, and they came to an agreement where Morris would participate in practices wearing a non-contact jersey. So he would be in the huddle, he would run the plays, and he would demonstrate his knowledge of the playbook and have chemistry with his teammates, but nobody was allowed to hit him. And the reporters in the newspapers just talked about how bizarre it was that, he's running through the line and, Carl Banks and Harry Carson, like they can't touch him. and that went right up until just a couple of hours before kickoff when they played Dallas in week 1 on Monday Night Football. Morris traveled with the team to Dallas, but he wasn't in the locker room. He was outside on a payphone with George Young and his agent, and they got the deal done. And then he went in and put on his pads and played that night.
So before we jump that to there, let's just real quick, the Giants going into the draft, coming off a winning season in '85, had something that a lot of winning teams don't usually have when you roll into the next draft, and that is, even though they were drafted low, the Giants had a ton of draft picks and due to a number of moves and trades. So let's talk about that real quick.
Well, the Giants, obviously they had a tremendous defense in '85. They actually, believe it or not, led the NFL in sacks that year. They had more sacks than the famous Chicago Bears '85 defense. And but they had 2 players who were unhappy. Mark Collins had held out into the '85 season. He missed half the year. He was traded to Denver.
Mark Haynes.
I'm sorry, Mark Haynes.
Yep.
You're right.
Yep.
Because they used Mark Collins. They drafted Mark Collins. But they traded Haynes to the Denver Broncos, and they got 2 second-round picks, one in '86 and one in '87. And they held the rights, another USFL player, Gary Zimmerman. He did not want to play in the East Coast in a big city like New York. He was from the West Coast, and he wanted to be in a less intense environment. So he agreed to be traded to the Minnesota Vikings, and the Giants got 2 second-round picks from the Vikings, both in '86. So the surprising thing is with the Giants, with all these picks and their strong defense, they used every single pick for defensive players.
I remember that draft. That was like, oh my God, defense. It just kept going.
Yeah. Loaded up.
Yeah.
Is there truth that we know of to the fact that Parcells actually wanted Reggie White and George Young went with Gary Zimmerman, who ultimately didn't want to play for the Giants? Because I've heard that rumor multiple times.
It's a story that came out later. I couldn't find anything in the newspapers that were current to the time, 85, 86, when these things were going on. But, some people would say, oh, yeah, Parcells. There's a lot of that Parcells wanted to draft this guy, Young, overruled him. Maybe. It sounds like it could be true.
Man, that would have been something.
He was the most dominant defensive player I've ever seen other than Lawrence Taylor in my lifetime was Reggie White in his prime. I mean, he just abused the Giants. He was just
I'm sure Phil Simms could attest to that.
He was not counting Lawrence Taylor, he was the best defensive player I've ever seen in football. So him and LT together would have been insane.
So on top of the fact that the Giants went defense, and they're a I don't want to say a loaded team, but they were a very good defensive team to begin with. All these guys who, for the most part, all of them, Greg Lasker is probably the one. He did play a lot, but he didn't outside of special teams, he really wasn't contributing a ton. Those guys that they drafted early on, Eric Dorsey, Pepper Johnson, Eric Howard, Mark Collins. I mean, you go down the list, those John Washington, they all played significant time and downs in through the season, into the playoffs, and in the Super Bowl. It's remarkable when you look at a team that was in its own environment, was loaded on one side of the field. If you looked at it and you said, their offense, there's some players I know, but where do they stack up across the league? Their defense, those guys stacked up across the league with linebacking core stacked up with any other linebacking core in the NFL. To have those defensive players contribute and bring that about, that was a big swing, a big hit. The rest of the draft, not so much, but they hit a home run with those early picks.
Yeah,
Eric Howard played a lot.
Yes,
but Jim Burt, especially late in the year, Jim Burt was missing games because he was having back problems. Eric Howard played a lot, and he played really, really well. And Mark Collins played quite a bit too. He started out the year as the punt returner, but he played corner a lot. He was platooning with Elvis Patterson. And Pepper Johnson got a lot of playing time late and in the playoffs.
Late in the season, yep.
My reaction was, because I know we won't bring it up when we were getting to that game, but when they played the 49ers in the playoffs and we were up so much and they were bringing in the reserves, as a young fan, again, I was graduating high school and in college, I remember thinking, oh my God, the guys that we just drafted were just abusing the 49ers too in the playoff game in the third and the fourth quarter. Pepper Johnson had an interception.
Yes.
You had other guys out there on the field, and I'm like, this team is going to be good for a long time, because the guys that, John, you're just talking about, they were getting on the field in the playoffs and finally together, and they were still really good. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I just remember being very excited.
I think Eric Dorsey got a sack in that game.
Yep. I mean, all the young guys were playing really well. So, yeah.
And Dorsey would really be the one guy that you maybe thought, just his stature alone, dude had the weirdest neck I've ever seen outside of Takeo Spikes. It was huge, and he just never really kind of turned the corner to what, I don't know if it was injuries, I don't know what it was, but he never really went that next step. But everybody, Eric Dorsey, if you go back and look at the George Martin sack for a safety in the Super Bowl, you got Eric Howard is right there. Eric Howard is in that picture. He was driving the middle of the field deck. Mm-hmm. He was getting a lot of pass rush from the interior portion of the Giants defensive line. It was pretty impressive to see what they did with that group. It was a masterful draft at the top of the draft for the Giants. So let's look ahead. We're into training camp now, and we already just talked about Joe Morris got a non-contact jersey. We got LT's coming off his things, not talking to anybody. Any other storylines that we want to? Because Phil Simms, I believe I'm correct. Phil Simms, not that it matters, but he won the MVP of the Pro Bowl at the end of the '85 season. So here he comes. And did the Giants play in the Hall of Fame game in the '86 preseason?
No,
Or was
they
it
played in
85? 85.
Yeah.
Okay, 85. So now we're here. What other storylines, if there was any, that we should concern ourselves with before the season starts?
It was mostly they were. I have this really good quote from Phil McConkey, and he had told the story about after the loss in the Bears game. It was how focused and how on the same page all the players and all the coaches were thinking the same thing, and it started in that locker room. So McConkey said, our 1986 season actually started in that locker room in Chicago in January. Coach Parcells told us after our defeat he would do anything and everything he could to get us to the next level. He expected us to. He told us George Martin and Harry Carson didn't deserve what had happened. He said George and Harry deserved to be champions. He had us aiming at Super Bowl 21 before they even played Super Bowl 20.
Mm.
Oh, miss those days. Miss those days. Because again, this is a different feeling for us Giants fans. For a lot of Giants fans, you don't really know this because they haven't been, even if you go back to 07 and 11, both those seasons were not, they didn't come into it going, this team could be one of the best teams in the NFL. I mean, the 07 team, they were coming off, up and down, 06 season. Tiki Barber leaves. He kind of shits on Eli in the offseason, kind of making comments that he's not really a leader and all this other stuff. And they go into that season and you don't know what you got. The 11 team, they didn't play, maybe in some cases, they didn't play up to what they could have been. They were up and down, and then went on a run. And a lot of things fell into place the right way. This 86 team, you come in 85, you get a really good draft going into 86. You've got the league's one of the best players on defense on the outside linebacker. You've got a young and up-and-coming linebacker on the other side, Harry Carson, the venerable, who's Hall of Famer for the Giants. You've got this defense ready to go, and an offense that's and Phil Simms, is he turning the corner? That's kind of where it was at. His stats were there to a degree. 85 was a little kind of up and down as well. The Giants didn't have a great receiving core. That was one of the things that they kind of lacked a little bit. But here we go. Now we roll in. We get through training camp, and they open on a Monday night against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. And all I can remember in that game is there were so many moments I thought the game was over and we won. And then for the first time ever, I watched the Giants defense wilt on a Monday night game. But thoughts, because there was a lot of things. You brought up the Joe Morris thing, but there were a lot of things in that game that kind of just didn't play out the rest of the season. But for that one game, that microcosm of the season, it was an odd one for the Giants.
The Giants moved the ball well. Phil Simms threw for 300 yards. Bobby Johnson had some big misses. And, Morris ran pretty well for a guy who, didn't get hit all summer.
Yeah.
But the defense is, Tony Dorsett and Herschel Walker, like the Giants, the 85 Giants defense that was so good. They were number 2 in the NFL against the rush after Chicago. They were off. The defense, the defense made uncharacteristic mental errors. They were missing assignments and giving up yards. And the Giants actually came back. They were losing 14-0. They came back. They tied it. I think they may have taken the lead briefly in the third quarter, but Dallas came back and they liked it. It was like the final game of the 85 season. The Giants blew a game they should have won.
My issue with this was in 84, the Giants had swept Dallas. In 85, I felt strongly, though, that even though Dallas swept the Giants were a far better team than Dallas. I felt the Giants were still a far better team than Dallas when the 86 team season started. And my reaction to the opener was, holy crap, this is just like 85 again, where we let a inferior Dallas Cowboy team beat us. And if we're going to go through another 85 like season, it's going to be very difficult to get to the Super Bowl. So this actually was the low point of the 86 season to me. We might talk about the Seattle game, But this game really bothered me a lot, and I'm glad it was right in the beginning because most of the rest of the season was a joyride. But this season, I thought, holy crap, here we go again with Dallas. We should have swept them last year. We should have won the division, but we just let them win again. And for those who weren't around, what happened is Herschel Walker scored in the last minute of the game on a draw play, and it was a terrible way to lose the football game.
It was, and the defense at the end. I mean, LT was dragging. I mean, they were gassed at the end of the game. They just, whether it was the heat, whether it was just the way camp went for them earlier, whatever it was, there are pieces when you look, it's not the LT, it's not the Banks, it's not the Carson that you're used to. They were gassed, and Walker, you could see it was coming at that point on that, right before that play. The way they were lined up, just kind of the way they were coming off the ball, it was too easy. I think Tony Dorsett got hurt in that game earlier in the game. I think he got an ankle injury because he only had like 8 carries in the game. But overall, it was such a letdown, especially because the Giants did take the lead. They had retaken the lead late in the game. To lose that game like that, thinking, oh man, this is our season, that's a real kick in the teeth. And I think teams of the past, 82, 83, 80, whatever, those would have been like, oh, that's a death knell. This is over. The feeling was that, but you still felt pretty good that the talent was there. But that was a tough one because it was also Monday Night Football, which for those who pay attention now, Monday Night Football doesn't mean as much as it used to. That was a showcase because remember, there were only so many networks that actually showed football, not like everything and every streaming platform and all this other stuff. And that everybody tuned in to Monday Night Football, and to see the Giants lose, that was a tough one.
I'll just throw one more thing out there because it was a Monday night game. We had also seen that the San Diego Chargers had just put up 50 points in week 1, and we had to play them in week 2. And it was like, oh my goodness, you better watch out because you could be 0-2 very quickly here. So that was the other thing with San Diego, who was with Dan Fouts, who is, again, if you weren't old enough, Dan Fouts was a darn good quarterback back in the day, and they had a awesome offense. So it was like
they had Wes Chandler, James Lofton, and Gary Anderson was the running back. He had a big game against the Dolphins week 1.
Kellen Winslow, they were awesome.
So
Eric Coryell.
That's right.
And I'm sort of previewing it a little bit too, but we're going to be facing a very angry Raiders team in week 3 as well, that we were supposed to lose that game. So this season, again, it was like 0-1 all of a sudden, and then are the Giants staring at maybe 0-3 at some point here. So we didn't do that. It ended up winning the next 2 games, but it was a little scary at the beginning. That was as a fan back then, I was like,
sure.
Oh my God, is this going to get out of control early? So
here we go. Let's swing it because we'll try to go through, instead of each game really long.
Yes.
Next week, San Diego comes down high. They are high powered. Everybody's like, oh, Giants defense struggled against Dallas. The Chargers, you got to watch out. Look at the points they put up. This was anything but that for the Chargers. They found out playing the Dolphins in week 1 was not the same thing as going to the Meadowlands and playing the New York Giants.
Yep, the Giants had 7 takeaways. Dan Fouts threw 5 interceptions. All 6 San Diego possessions in the second half ended with turnovers. And Terry Kennard was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week. He had 2 interceptions, and he recovered a fumble. And the defense got it together. They never, that Dallas game was the 85 Giants. The 86 Giants season started in week 2.
Right. I think Kenny Hill had 2 picks too, right? Or
he did, yes.
Yeah. So before our safeties had 4 interceptions alone, which was, and again, Dan Fouts, it wasn't just Miami, and John's right, it was Miami's different entity, but Dan Fouts and that team could score, and to hold them, we held them to 7. Was it 7 points?
7.
It was incredible. I mean, so yeah, that was a big deal.
Now, the one big negative to me was Phil Simms was wide open, and he drops the pass. I believe Tony Galbraith threw it to him.
Yeah, that was a perfect pass from Galbraith. It was a perfect pass. It was right in the hands.
That was such a not normal Giants play. It was tricky. It was, he put Simms in his emotion and made a throw. I was like, and then he drops it. He drops it.
There's one noteworthy thing I should mention because this carries through most of the regular season. was the Giants' wide receiver injury problems already began.
Yeah.
Bobby Johnson came into the game with a sore ankle. Lionel Manuel and Stacy Robinson both left the game. They returned, but they missed, a lot of series. And it was Jeff Hostetler's first appearance as wide receiver. And he played wide receiver and special teams quite a bit this year out of necessity because the Giants were so banged up. If you remember, they released Phil McConkey at the end of the preseason. In a couple of weeks, they would have to trade him back because they were just so desperate for a healthy body of wide receiver.
Yeah, and if is it the week after or 2 weeks after, and Emmanuel then is gone for the bulk of the season. He doesn't come back until the playoffs.
Got hurt in the Saints game.
Yeah,
I think it was a hamstring or was it a knee? I thought it was
a knee. He got it was a kind of a dirty hit in the end zone. It was late. It was low. His knee went sideways, and he was out for the rest of the regular season. And that was when the Giants traded for McConkey after that, because Mark Collins was also hurt returning a punt in that game. So they had a quarterback playing a wide receiver and had nobody return. They put Tony Galbraith in the Saints game returning punts, and it was frightening. He was dropping the ball. The Giants, he was like muffing every punt. It was so. Parcells told George Young, "You got to get McConkey back here."
So unlike some regimes that we've seen recently, where you keep putting the guy back, we'll just put Eric Gray back out there. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. So the Giants dominate that game. They were the fearsome defense that you wanted to see. They not only dominated the game, but they were very physical in that game. Now you go on the road, so you go out and play the Raiders. Raiders weren't a great team by any stretch of the imagination, but they were tough and they were dirty.
Well, I will throw this out there. The Raiders back then were not the Raiders that most people remember now. The Raiders were a perennial, really good football team. They were always in. They were one of those teams. Again, we were talking earlier. The Giants never get to the Super Bowl. It's always the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Dallas Cowboys, the Washington Redskins, or the 49ers. But the Raiders were always one of those teams that were considered in that upper echelon, and they were very rarely, if ever, 0-2. And I vividly remember this: the Giants. Most people did not expect the Giants to go out west and win this game, even though the Raiders were 0-2. We were supposed to lose that football game. I remember that. I don't. Larry probably knows, but I think we would have been underdogs, maybe even going.
They were, and one of the Giants' bugaboos, that one of the many they got rid of this year, was the Giants never won on the West Coast. The Giants hadn't won a West Coast game since 1981 when they beat Seattle. They always lost to the Niners in Candlestick. They had lost to the Raiders in '83. The Giants just never played well on the West Coast. And many people, and also Jim Plunkett was coming back for this game. He hadn't played since '85. And the Raiders thought that was going to give them a boost. Marcus Allen had an 11-game, 100-yard streak, and everyone expected him to extend that record against the Giants.
Right.
And none of that happened.
And so Howie Long's still on that team. I mean, that was a really good defensive
really
football
good.
Team. That was
really good.
Lester Hayes and Mike Haynes. I mean, that was a good Raiders team.
And Lester Hayes was still there.
Yeah.
Ray Guy was still punting. They had a lot of good players. Players who won the Super Bowls in '80 and '83 were still there playing for the Raiders.
Yeah. So here's a string conspiracy theory stretching over a long span of years. Who was on that Raiders team in that game that would ultimately come back to F the Giants in 2002?
I have the answer.
Yeah, Trey Junkin was on that Raiders team. You son of a!
And he was injured. He caught a couple of passes in the first quarter, and he looked like he was going to hurt the Giants. He went out with a knee injury, and I think he missed the rest of the season.
And we had a couple of defensive backs. I think Kenny Hill came from the Raiders.
He came from the Raiders. Yeah.
And so did Ted Watts, who we had in '85, I think. Maybe. Yeah. I don't remember when Ted Watts was
there. I believe so.
So, but anyway, so we won't dwell on it. But they win that game, so the Giants are 2-1. So
now, was there a story with Joe Morris that week? Was he ill, or there was something? I'm trying to remember. There was something about Morris that week. They were a little concerned with him.
In the fourth quarter, when the Giants were running out the clock, he took a shot in the face and it fractured the bridge of his nose.
That's right.
During the week, the Giants gave him like anti-inflammatories, and he had an allergic reaction. So he couldn't play the home game against the Saints that week. Lee Roussan started, and he played pretty well.
I knew I remembered there was an injury with Joe Morris that was concerning. I'm like, damn, 40 years ago. God. Okay, so now we go to a game that is one of my all-time favorite games because of the way it started and the way it finished, but also because it has one of the most iconic moments and videos of LT that when you look back at that season. So let's start this game against the Saints. The Giants are supposed to win this game. They're home. Now you do have the two pieces. The Saints have probably the second best, maybe third, depending on if you want to throw the Patriots in there at the same time, but the second best quartet of linebackers in the NFL, with the Giants being number one. There was that piece there, but the rest of the Saints team was pretty average. They come into the Meadowlands and they take, I believe, 17-0 in the first half. And that game
was some help from Phil Simms.
Yeah, that game was not looking good to start off with.
Yeah, Simms threw a couple of bad interceptions in the first quarter. The Saints turned them into 10 points. But the first Saints touchdown, and it was hard for me not to mention this because you talked about Kenny Hill in '88. Yeah. He did the same thing in this game on the Saints' first touchdown. I can't remember who the receiver was, but Terry Kennard was in
Eric Martin. It was Eric Martin.
Terry Kennard was right behind him. Maybe could have made a shoestring tackle down the field, but Kenny Hill came in on a bad angle. He launched himself, and he took out Kennard, and then the Saint receiver just pranced down the rest of the field untouched into the end zone. It was a foreshadowing.
Yes.
My memory of
Belichick needed to take Kenny Hill and look, you hit the guys in the opposite color jersey. Don't take out our guys.
My memory of this game was, because remember, I'm in college in Washington, and it's not like today where you can always get any game that you want. You got the game that they put on the air. I wasn't able to see this game, but I was watching the scores when I was watching the other games. 17-0 comes across the screen. So I'm thinking, all right, we got by the Dan Fouts. We got by that Raiders team. Again, that Raiders game was tough. When did we win that by? 14? Was it 14?
14-9.
14-9. That was a close fought game. I thought, okay, finally, we got an easy one. We're going to beat the Saints. 17-0 comes across the. What the hell is going on? Yeah. And then, of course, I see, that I keep following the game. So I didn't see this game. I just lived it through the score coming across the screen because there was no internet. There was no way for me to find out what the hell was going on. I was just living by, when they were going back to the studio, we have an update. That's all how I saw this game. So, but I didn't know why they were down 17-0 to the Saints. I was like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, the offense was a little bit like the '85 Giants. They were playing down to the level of the competition.
Yes.
Yeah. And the Saints, you're talking about the Giants linebackers, two rookies on the Saints who played pretty well. Sam Mills and Pat Swilling, they were both rookies that year. Yeah. In another year or two, those guys were a force. Very, very good players.
And Eric Martin, who we talked about, the touchdown was 60 yards. He finished the day with 2 receptions for 67 yards. Wasn't exactly like the Saints were just having this explosion, but the Giants just totally just gave it away. Now, is this the same game that Bavaro gets injured?
Yes. Okay. His jaw in the second quarter they wired his jaw shut. Zeke Mowat got a lot of playing time. Zeke Mowat came back. He missed the entire '85 season.
Right.
And Zeke Mowat was instrumental, caught his first touchdown in 2 years and helped the Giants come back. And with all these receivers getting hurt and Hostetler playing wide receiver, the Giants, when Bavaro came back, used a lot of 2 tight end sets. And they played a lot of games in the first 2/3 of the season. Their base offense was 2 tight ends, Mowat and Bavaro, and the one healthy wide receiver they had.
And I want to emphasize, in case people didn't hear that, Mark Bavaro got his jaw broken in this game. They had to wire it shut in the locker room, and he came back out and he played with a broken jaw that was wired shut. and he was an instrumental reason why they won the game. I'm sorry.
He had 7. No, I was again. He had 7 receptions for 110 yards in that game.
Touchdown, right? And a touchdown.
Yes, a broken jaw.
Yeah,
with a broken jaw.
Like that anymore.
No, they don't do that anymore. He in the same game, he comes back. They just wired it shut. He couldn't even talk. He was like, oh, and they talk about in America's game. Bill Parcells says he was like, oh, he couldn't even talk. So,
but the good thing is he didn't really say anything anyway. So he was all set.
Larry,
reporters didn't notice.
Larry, I have a question for you. I thought originally they had reported that he had 2 teeth knocked out.
Yeah, the Giants were being a little cagey. They didn't want it to come out that he had a broken jaw. They didn't want players going after him, so they just said, "Yeah, it's 2 chipped teeth." But I think it was somewhere during the playoffs where it came out that his jaw was actually broken.
Yeah. So I mean that, like Larry just said, they don't make them like that anymore. They do
not.
And as Larry just said too, it's important to. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Zeke Mowat had an amazing 84 season, and he was supposed to be the guy heading into 85, and he was having an awesome preseason until he got his ACL, I think it was torn against the Jets.
Yeah, it was his knee. But
he was
the
out for
Steelers
the year.
Last season, last preseason game.
And that opened the door for Mark Bavaro in 85, and then Mowat came back in 86. So, and Mowat kind of took the whole year to sort of round back in the form. I mean, I think he eventually
kept getting better.
Yeah, he kept getting better.
He was getting more playing time, especially in the middle of the year with all the injured wide receivers and the 2 tight end sets. The Giants relied on the run a lot, so he didn't catch a lot of balls. But, when the ball went his way, I mean, he got open and he had good hands, and, he played very well, and he helped the Giants get through a really tough stretch in the middle of the year when Sims and the offense were struggling.
So things started to turn
this
game.
Wait, John, you talk about the play that you mentioned.
No, that's what I was going to do right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So things started to turn in this game defensively a little bit. I think some of the bite came back to the Giants defense in this game when the Saints call running play. LT lined up at outside linebacker, or as they call it today, edge. But he was at right outside linebacker. They're running away from him, running to their right. LT chases down Ruben Mays, running parallel behind the line, running down the line of scrimmage, catches Ruben Mays before he even gets to the line of scrimmage, does the iconic gunslinger thing from there. That just changed everything. That energized that team. And he did it more than once in that game. He caught Dalton Hilliard a couple of times that way. There was just something about that moment where you just saw the pure, just raw athleticism of LT, something other players just don't show. He kicks it up a notch. And when he did that changed everything, I thought, for that game.
Yeah, it's a big momentum swing. And that's what the Giants players used to say, LT putting on the Superman cape.
Yeah.
So they survive. They win that game. I mean, a lot to overcome. Had to overcome Dave Wilson.
Yeah. And that was it was important because the Giants were trailing 17-0. Again, they had a long stretch for many years where when they fell behind, even 10-0, they were done. Comebacks were very rare. They had that game in 84 against the Chiefs where they were trailing by 13 and they came back. But that 17-point comeback was their biggest since they had a comeback against Tampa Bay in 78, but the one people kept talking about was 1970. They had a game against the Redskins when they were trailing by 19 and they came back and won that game. But between 1970 and 1986, comebacks by the Giants were very, very rare.
Yet we will talk about another one later on.
Yeah.
Sure will.
Which brings us to perhaps the lamest victory the Giants had in the season, the Cardinals game. I don't even remember.
About playing in St. Louis brought out the worst in the Giants. That everybody's probably thinking about that 1983 Monday Night Football game that ended in nobody deserved to win, and it fittingly ended in a tie.
Do you guys even? I don't even remember this game that well. Do you? I don't even.
I do, just from it was a pretty physical game. The one thing about it, Phil Simms was really bad. Phil Simms was really bad. Like, he was so bad that if you equated it to today, you would call it less than Daniel Jones' worst games. He had 8 of 24 for like 100 and some odd yards. I think he had 3 interceptions. I mean, it was bad.
13-6, the Giants win this game. It's not good. But they win. They win, but it's not good.
It was ugly football.
Yes.
I don't even remember this game.
The funniest thing is the Giants had a chance to run out the clock, and I think it was like 8 or 9 seconds. I don't remember the exact time, and it was 4th down, and instead of running, they just threw a deep pass, and it fell incomplete, and the Cardinals had one more play, and they were close enough where they threw a Hail Mary, and the Giants knocked the ball down at the goal line. Imagine if the Cardinals had completed that.
Now, I remember
I rewatched this game on YouTube a couple of years ago.
Well, did you really?
Well, I had blocked that. That really happened.
So there is a significant piece from this game, or immediately after, but tied to this game. This was the last game that Otis Anderson played for the Cardinals. He actually had 50 some odd yards rushing against the Giants. The Giants were a little thin, a little worried about being thin offensively. They make a trade and they bring in Otis Anderson to the team after that game. So they saw him there, and he had not looked good, by the way. There's a highlight of him where they're playing, I believe it's the 49ers, and Keena Turner lights up Otis Anderson. I mean, just lights him up. But the Giants needed a veteran back. They bring him in. So he's actually, the following week, Otis Anderson's on that Giants team who played the Eagles now at home. A 4:00 game, division rival. It's their first division game since opening it with the Cowboys. This was a fun one. This was one of those games where you got to enjoy it from beginning to end.
Well, they got the Harry Carson catches a touchdown pass on a fake field goal, which was sort of like the icing on the. I don't know the icing. Who scored the last touchdown? Was it Lee Roussan?
I think Lee Roussan got his first touchdown. Yeah, I think it was.
I don't know why, but Lee Roussan was always one of my favorite players. I don't know why, but I just like Lee Roussan, so that was exciting. But Harry scoring a touchdown, getting a touchdown on a fake field goal attempt to me was, and it was Buddy Ryan. And this is the beginning of we're going to start to see this. Buddy Ryan's got, we don't know this yet, but Buddy Ryan's got bounties on the Giant players. And we see this later on in the season where Joe Morris gets thrown into the wall. But anytime you beat Buddy Ryan, anytime you beat the Eagles, and it's this badly, 35-3, was it
35-3? 35-3.
Yeah, this was a fun game.
Yeah, and Lawrence Taylor had his first monster game. He had 4 sacks. You showed one of the highlights, at the intro to this, where he comes in and drills Jaworski, right on the 7 on his back from behind it. And Lawrence Taylor was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week after this one. And I'm pretty sure Buddy Ryan always gave the left tackle help after this game.
Well, that was the arrogant thing. I want to say it was Ron Jaworski who's come out and said, Buddy didn't worry about it. He was like, oh, we could take care of him. And they had Keith Byers was the back that they called out to pick up LT on the blitz, and they had Byers went to cut him, and LT just jumps over him. It's like jumps over him and just drills. And the Eagles were driving. That was the one they were driving. That was ultimately what led to their field goal. But that team that had some momentum that could have swung things a little differently, but LT dropping them there. I'm just saying everything plays its role. They took the chance. They were like, no, and LT was like, 4 sacks in that game. Could have had more. It was one of the most just dominant games I've seen the Giants play in a while. The fake field goal to Harry Carson was awesome. I mean, he has padded up. I think so often today you see when people call the plays like this, if they call a trick play, some of the players who have whatever, and they dress a little differently today than they did then, but they make it obvious when they take certain things off or because I'm going to be catching a pass. Harry had forearm pass. They were like all down. When he goes to catch it, it's almost out of his hands when he makes the catch. It was so awesome to see. And then I've always been a big fan of Lee Roussan as well. And I believe he's had multiple touchdowns against the Eagles over the years. But it was such a fun game to see. And it was the start of Ron Jaworski's ultimate decline here, where the Philadelphia kind of, it went a little further, but one, Jaworski was getting beat up, but two, they kind of knew we can't keep putting him out there against the likes of an LT or the Giants or Washington with Manley. They needed to go in a different direction.
And the other thing I just want to throw out real quick before we get to the Giants' final loss, believe it or not, of the season. But no, you think of that. The final loss of the season was in October, and they don't lose another game. But we talked about earlier about Joe Morris being a breakout player in '85. We forgot to mention that Leonard Marshall was a breakout player in '85, and we haven't been talking about him enough. So while LT is causing this havoc, and Carl Banks is now really, really emerging. He was there the previous year, but in the year before that, but he's really starting to come on. We got to remember, it's also Leonard Marshall on the same side with Lawrence Taylor that's causing trouble here too.
Right. And
it seemed like every time the Giants played the Eagles during this time period, and yes, Giants fans, there was a time when the Giants owned the Eagles. It always seemed like Lawrence Taylor and Leonard Marshall were always hitting Jaworski. And if Jaworski was knocked out, it was Cunningham. It always seemed like those two were terrorizing whoever was blocking on that side of the Eagle line. And I just want to throw out the fact that, again, it's not just Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks and Harry Carson, but Leonard Marshall's up there, Jim Burt's up there, George Martin's up there. It's funny, when John and I have interviewed players from that team, the front seven players always say this team was their best and favorite team. The secondary players always seem to say the 1990 team was their favorite team. And it's kind of interesting. But this team was very much driven by their front seven. And this game was, in the upcoming games, the Giants' front seven on defense. If you want to know anything about the Giants' defense this year, it was driven by their front seven players, that they just dominated the line of scrimmage. Teams could not run the ball. I think I've asked Larry a few times. The Giants went I can't even remember, a season and a half without allowing a 100-yard rusher.
I think it was 2.5. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was a lot. They gave up one in '87 to a strike player, and they don't count that. It's 84, 86. They didn't give up any. We could look that up. I'll throw it in the forum.
So the point is no one ran the ball on the Giants. Even when we were playing Riggins and Tony Dorsett, no one was running the ball on them, and they became one-dimensional, and the Giants were just getting after the quarterback.
I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there's a really good Joe Gibbs quote where he talks about this, and he said the reason the Giants are the toughest team for the Redskins to play is because they're the only team that can play 7 in the box and still defend the run. They can always have a safety deep. The Giants like to play that cover 2 shell. Right. The secondary is always accounted for because their front 7, the 3 linemen and the linebackers, can stop the run. They don't need to drop an 8th man into the box. And that's why the Giants, George Rogers had a really good year in '86. He could do nothing against the Giants. All 3 games they stuffed him. And they never walked Kenny Hill up into the box.
And the reverse of that is also true. When the Giants secondary had injuries, and they did later in the season, Kennard goes down, you've got Herb Welch, whatever. The Giants secondary, even with Elvis Patterson and Collins is young, it's not the best secondary in the NFL. So when the Giants wanted to protect that some, but still rush the passer, they just put 3 down guys. It was Marshall, Martin, and Taylor were the 3 that would rush, and they dropped everybody else back, and they still got pressure with just 3 guys.
Right. And so this game just again, we talked about the Cardinal game where it was ugly 13-6. You're starting to see the defense exert itself and just start to take control of games. So, and I want to talk about that Redskins game that you're talking about later on, because those were to me some of the best games from the season were the Redskins, all 3 Redskins.
That was the premier matchup in the NFL. And during the game, every time the Giants played the Redskins, it was either Monday Night Football or it was 4:00 on CBS with Summerall and Madden.
Right.
But I think that started in '84 and it carried all the way through '90.
But
Giants and Redskins.
This particular game with Seattle, however, this is their last loss. This is another problem that we've seen. And actually, amazingly enough, it is a problem that gets flipped in the postseason. But during the regular season, Phil Simms was extremely up and down, and he was turnover prone. He had more interceptions than he had touchdown passes this year. And in this particular game, he had four interceptions against the Seahawks in the game, which, by the way, still has one of the best catches I've ever seen by Solomon Miller, the only real catch that Solomon Miller ever had. But it was an amazing catch across the middle of the field. Counted for nothing. But this game was so bad. A 17-12 game. Giants just did not look good in this game. It was offensively very lethargic. Running game was meh. It's not like Seattle did a ton either. That was the thing. It was really more of an offensive sleepwalk for the Giants.
This is the game. I'm sorry, you go, Larry.
I was just going to say the Giants actually held the statistical advantages, but aside from the 4 interceptions, Simms was sacked 7 times, and he was pressured a lot more. And this is the game where Brad Benson had his helmet bashed down on the bridge of his nose, and it busted it open. And he's from this point through the Super Bowl, he played with that bloody Band-Aid on the bridge that John Madden made famous. He was showing it in that second Redskin game, and when he was going up against Manly. So that started. So maybe that was the the good omen, Brad Benson's Band-Aid, and then the Giants just ran the table.
And for people who don't know, Brad Benson got that cut on his nose in this game, and every time what happened is his helmet would come down and reopen that wound on his nose. So by the end of every game from here on out, his nose is bleeding. And so again, it's a different time period. And as a fan, you're like, oh God, it was kind of gross. You're like, stop opening up that wound. But it became a tough guy thing for him.
Yeah, he made the All Madden team.
Yes, he did.
Because of that Band-Aid.
That Band-Aid and shutting down Dexter Manley. The only thing I remember from this game in terms of the significance of it is, to this day, John's done it with me, Ray Arlington's done it with me, and other fans have done it with me. They'll always say, all right, I'm going to stump you. Who was the wide receiver that Phil Simms in the Seattle game? And it's always Solomon Miller. They always think someone's going to stump you because Solomon Miller's only catch came in this game, and so it's always the butt of a joke. It's always a trivia question. So if anyone's listening out there, remember the name Solomon Miller, because you'll impress somebody with the trivia question someday.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, I have a trivia question, but I'll use it for another night.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up something that we probably should have brought up at the beginning. The Giants went into the season. The end 85, they had multiple place kickers. They went into the season with a new kicker. We had Bob Thomas was the kicker to start the season off. The Giants settled down in the special teams, bringing in Raul Alegre, became the kicker at this point now for the Giants. So I just wanted to address that because that's going to be important in the near future. So this game done with. West Coast, it's crap. It's not a good game. Giants come back home. It's now a Monday night. Some other major sport events happening at the same time. Giants get Washington at home, Monday Night Football, a chance to another division game, but a chance to kind of take the sting and the bad taste of the game they just lost and the game on Monday Night Football already that they played against a division rival. They had a chance to do something about it. This was not an easy game, though. This was a microcosm of the entire year for the Giants with Washington. This was a knockdown, drag-out kind of thing, and we saw the real dominance of the Giants' running game in this game for sure.
And for people who don't know, it's Game 7 of the World Series with the Mets and the Red Sox, and many, many, many Giants fans have portable televisions with them, keeping one eye on the Mets and one eye on Mets on TV and the other eye on the Giants. And it comes back to, and I'm going to leave this to Larry when we get to it. It affects the game at one point, which is one of the most awesome plays I've ever seen in Giants history. I want to just preface this by stating once again, my opinion, the Washington Redskins were the most serious threat, in my opinion, to the New York Giants. They were a very physical football team, a big offensive line, and a very good defense, explosive weapons on offense, very good wide receivers, and extremely well coached. Joe Gibbs and that staff, his entire staff was a awesome coaching staff. I had nothing but respect for the 1986 Washington Redskins. They were a outstanding football team. And during this time period, if the Giants weren't winning divisions and Super Bowls, it seemed like the Redskins were doing it. And the way a lot of these Giants Redskins games went is the Giants would often get a lead, and then the Redskins would come back in the game with big passing plays. And again, this is kind of where our secondary wasn't as strong as our front seven. So you would see guys like Gary Clark and Art Monk get big plays against the Giants, and Clint Didier, and you have these guys get, the Giants would be up maybe by 10 points or 14 points, and all of a sudden the Redskins are coming back and it gets tight. And this was one of those games. Larry, tell me if I'm wrong, but the Giants got up in this game, and then the Redskins, I think, came back and tied this game. And
the Giants led 13-3 at halftime. And late in the second quarter was when you were alluding to the Mets, when Ray Knight hit the home run to put the Mets ahead. The Redskins had the ball, they were driving, and the crowd erupted, and it caused the Redskins to false start. And then a little while later, Darryl Strawberry hit a home run, and it happened again. The Redskins were drawn offsides twice because of the Giants fans watching the Mets game on their portable TVs in the stadium. So the Giants led 13-3 at the half. They scored a touchdown early in the third to go up 20-3, and then all of a sudden, the Giants forgot to cover Gary Clark, who he set a Redskins record for receiving. He had 11 catches for 241 yards in this game. And the Redskins chiseled away, and they tied it with about 5 minutes or so in the fourth quarter, and it looked like it was heading into overtime.
And Gary Clark was a thorn in the Giants' side for a long time. He was a very good wide receiver.
He was.
And Jay Schrader had 420 in the game, so 420 yards. Joe Morris, on the other hand, for the Giants, touched the ball 36 times, 31 rushes, 5 receiving for 240 yards in that game. Absolutely dominant. Absolutely dominant.
And wait, I think they had 181 yards rushing, though. Wasn't it 181?
Yeah, 181.
36 combined touches,
five
receptions, 31 rushes, 181 and 59 is 240.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, it's good. I said combined.
I'm an old man. I don't hear so well out of this ear.
You son of a.
This was the first game where the Giants played pretty much exclusively with the 2 tight end offense because they had a lot of injuries. Stacey Robinson got hurt in the Seattle game. Mark Bavaro played tough guy, not only with the jaw, but he had an injured ankle in the Seattle game. He toughed it out for this game. And Phil McConkey, who they had just traded for a few weeks earlier, he had a couple of injured ribs in the Seattle game. He didn't play. So the only healthy wide receiver the Giants had was Bobby Johnson. And, Jeff Hostetler played a little bit, but it was mostly 2 tight ends and Carthon and Morris in this game by necessity because they just didn't have enough healthy bodies.
So the game was tied, if I remember this correctly. It was tied. And there was a key play towards the end of the game. It was short yardage. I don't know if it was 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2. And the Giants were trying to get a first down and a handoff to Morris. And not only does he get the first down, but he scores.
Yes.
And that put the Giants. I think that was the difference in the ball game.
Yes.
But I remember at the time they were just trying to get the first down in that situation, but he bounced it and he got into the end zone, and that was gigantic at the time.
Yeah, we're a little worried he scored too early, left too much time on the clock.
Oh, did they? The
Redskins got the ball back, but the Giants stopped them.
They stopped.
I used to not worry about that with the Giants defense. Now you just expect it. You're like, oh crap. So the Giants come off that game, stay home. It's a Sunday early game now with the Dallas Cowboys coming up. It was another ugly game. It was an ugly offensive game. It was also kind of a beginning of the end for the Cowboys in terms of their quarterback situation. It was Danny White on his way down. It's Carl Banks with a blitz through classic. I mean, just unloads on him.
Breaks his
wrist. So, but this game again was another Joe Morris special. I believe I'm going to look it up. 181 again. To back to back. Yes.
And the Giants went through, I think, and Larry can correct me on this, I think we knocked out 4 quarterbacks this year, I think. And
that is correct.
And this was one of the games where we knocked out the quarterback. and Joe Morris had back-to-back 181 yards. And the key point of this is the Giants had just played the Redskins and beaten them. They're playing the Cowboys right now, and then they're going to play the Eagles. So they're playing their three division rivals back-to-back-to-back. This is a really key stretch for the Giants.
This was really important because we should mention in the division race, there was a three-way tie for first place. After the Giants beat the Redskins, the Giants, Cowboys, and Redskins were all 6-2. So this game, when the Giants beat Dallas, Redskins won again. So was the Giants and the Redskins in first place. Cowboys moved down to second. And when you look at the whole NFC, on Monday night, the Bears lost at home to the Rams. That was their second loss. So it's not only are the Giants battling for the division title, but you kind of think down the road, home field for the playoffs.
And this was
I'm sorry.
This was a really bad game for Sims.
Yeah.
Offensively, it was as ugly as the Cardinals game.
Six completions, 67 yards. The Giants, again, though, to make a point that you've brought up multiple times, Larry, they played minimal wide receivers. Solomon Miller played the game. Bobby Johnson played. Phil McConkey played. That was it. They were the only ones that they had wide receiver.
Yeah, and McConkey was playing hurt. He had cracked ribs.
So they were not good in this game. But Joe Morris, again, back-to-back 181 yards, dominant running game. The Giants defense was all over the place. It just made life miserable for the Cowboys. You start to feel better about some things. The Seattle game kind of looking in the rearview mirror a little bit. And now you got Philadelphia, a game that was
just one thing I just want to mention about this.
Yeah.
What Larry said too, we have to emphasize the Giants had already lost to Dallas. So if they lose this game, Dallas sweeps them and owns the tiebreaker against the Giants too. And I'm going to try to be as fair as possible. Dallas outplayed the Giants in this game, and they had I think they had almost twice as many yards as we did. But I think we got
time of possession, everything.
Yeah, and I think we had a number of turnovers. I think there was a really bad. I think Herschel Walker fumbled the ball after a long completion or something like that. But there were. This is a game. This is one of those games where Dallas Cowboys fans could say we should have won this game because the Giants weren't that. I mean, the defense was okay, but they doubled us on offensive yardage. So this was a really important game that we kind of stole from the Cowboys here. That's
I have a fun fact for all the young Giant fans who may have scar tissue. The last play of this game, Raphael Septien lined up to attempt a 63-yard field goal that would have tied it and sent it to overtime, but he missed. It was short. Today we're kind of like, oh, they're lining up. This kick's going to go through. Not today. Not against the 86 Giants.
Yeah. Well, and at the same time too, 60-yard field goals back then. You had Dempsey with his kick, and then nobody else forever. It was even close. And now they do them. Now they do them left and right like they're nothing, unless you're the Giants. And then you get Young Wei Koo and you kick the ground.
When they always happen against the Giants now too, so that's
let's flip to the Philadelphia game once again. In this game, I can't remember a time now. Looking at the stats, I kind of forgot about this to this point. This was another game that Phil Simms had less than 10 completions in the game. This was another game with less than 10 completions. The Giants offense, they started out the team, they were up. I think it was 17-0 to start the game off. But the offense continues to be the Achilles heel, so to speak, of this team. They just can't seem to really put a lot of points, a lot of offense together. And the focal point of that struggle was Phil Simms.
The good thing I remember,
didn't have any healthy bodies. This was another game where they played two tight ends because they just didn't have enough healthy bodies on the outside, and they relied on Bavaro and Mowat to block and Carthon, and they opened holes for Morris. Morris again carried the Giants. It was Morris in the defense. Lawrence Taylor had 3 sacks. This is the game where they injured Dworsky. He didn't finish the year. This was the second week in a row they knocked out a quarterback. They knocked out White the week before. The Giants led 17-0 at the end of the third quarter, and then they kind of, let up a little bit. They played some prevent defense and then let the Eagles back into the game, and it ended up being a nail biter where, they could have won it going away.
One point that you made about the receiving core, I'll give you a stat. Solomon Miller led the team in targets with 3. Phil McConkey was the other receiver. He was targeted 2 times.
Yeah.
That was it. No other wide receivers are targeted in this game. And then really overall of any offense, it was McConkey, Miller, Bavaro, Carthan, Morris, Galbraith. They're the only ones that actually were either targeted or handled the ball in the game offensively for the Giants. That's how thin they were for this game.
Were Tuffy Lehmans and Ward Tough not available? They were probably healthy. They could have gotten to put their leather helmets on. They would probably would have liked this kind of football.
Apparently. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is the game where we start as Giants fans. Other teams already knew this from his days in Chicago. We're learning that Buddy Ryan's an asshole and that his players are assholes because they throw Joe Morris was it Eric Allen? I don't remember who the player was. But
somebody could say Andre Waters, but you could be right.
Andre, it was either Waters or Dirty Hopkins. It was either one of the two.
Somebody threw Joe Morris into the wall, and I think that got the Giants defensive players really pissed off, and that's when they knocked Jaworski out of the game. Mm-hmm. And
LT got picked up. So there was a point where they cracked back on LT. So he was coming around.
Game? Was that this game?
I'm positive it was the 86 game.
It might have been. I just didn't know if it was. Okay.
Because they were so mad about what happened in the earlier Giants game, they were going to make a point that LT was not going to get there. And they drilled LT on a crackback one. And it's like 2 consecutive plays after that. He's nailing. In fact, it is so bad, the NFL then to today. There would have been somebody calling it down going, get Jaworski off the field. His head just bounced off that cement field. I mean, that's what it was. It was carpet over cement. His head bounced off the turf. LT just slammed him down and then came through and did it again on the next play. They were pissed at that point.
And again, I just want to emphasize, so the Giants just beat Washington, Dallas, and now the Eagles for 3, and that was huge. They went 3-0 against the division, in which sets us up for now things are going to get real interesting.
Yep. And the Redskins won again. They went win for win. So they're both tied for first place. Dallas lost, so they're fading, but it's just Giants and Redskins. They just kept winning. You line them up, Giants and Redskins win week after week after week until they went head to head.
And Larry, that's a great point. As a fan at that time, everybody was watching the Redskins, and the Dallas is beginning to fade, as John pointed out with the quarterback issue. But we were, as a Giants fan, you were like, we won, but you were also watching the scoreboard because you were watching. Right. And as the season goes on, that late season game against Washington in Washington keeps becoming more and more and more important. We'll get to that. But as a fan, you're like, damn it, the Redskins won again. Damn it, the Redskins won again. And you're looking at that game in RFK down in December.
So, and I apologize if you want. I can't help it. I got a huge ass tattoo, and it's just like there's no tomorrow. So I'm sorry if I can't help it. If you see a girl, what the hell's wrong with him? That's what's wrong with him. Just real quick, I was gonna do it. I put that puppy on. So that got done. That's on my.
Oh, dear Lord!
Yeah.
God,
I had to cover up a tattoo. I had to cover up a tattoo that was there because it had a date tied to a previous relationship, and my wife was really annoyed with it for a long time.
I can see why.
But I needed a really big tattoo to cover it. So that's the cover. So that's the cover.
Right, now we're gonna get really interesting with the games.
So here we go. So now we go, and we've got a non-division game, a game against a team that's around, but they're not dominating. They've already lost 5 games coming into the season or at that point. So here comes the Minnesota Vikings. We're on the road in Minnesota, and this is one of the games when people look back, this might have been the defining game for Phil Simms in kind of getting him out of that funk that had been up to this point of the season. This was the one that needed him to come through, and he ultimately did. The game did not start out the greatest, though, for the Giants. Minnesota really kind of challenged them and put the Giants on their heels.
Floyd Peters, a great defensive coordinator, he kind of figured out how to slow down the Giants' running game. And by the way, it's worth mentioning this was the first game in a month where the Giants opened with one tight end and two wide receivers. Stacy Robinson came back, and he contributed to this game. He had some big catches, but it was a battle of field goals. I think it was 9-6 at halftime. Giants were ahead. This was Raul Allegre's first big game with the Giants. And then in the second half, it was back and forth. The Vikings scored a touchdown, and there was especially the fourth quarter, the third and fourth quarter, a lot of big plays on both sides. And the Giants' streak of knocking out quarterbacks for the season hit 3. They injured Tommy Kramer, and his backup came in. And part of the 85 Giants curse, they couldn't slow down backup quarterbacks. Jay Schrader beat them after they knocked out Joe Theismann.
Right.
So
there were others too. Yeah.
So that's another bugaboo the Giants took care of with this game. Big plays late. I don't want to get too far ahead, but it was hanging in the balance, and it kind of felt like, uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Eric.
I should say I forgot Floyd. It was Floyd Peters, and I just want to, when we're talking about these games, the other teams, some of these have legendary players on them, and this was a very good Minnesota Vikings defense. They had some very talented football players, and then when I look back,
one of the teams that beat the Bears, and they were talking about at the beginning of this game that the Vikings were in wild card contention, but they actually felt like the Bears were wavering, and they were not good in this. They beat a lot of bad teams. They had the softest schedule in the NFL, but the Vikings thought if they could beat the Giants, they could actually win the Central Division.
And the Vikings had one of the best wide receivers in football at this time.
Sure.
Anthony Carter, right?
Anthony
Carter. And he was dynamite. And so when we're talking about these legendary Giants teams, they're playing some really good football teams. These weren't easy wins.
The defensive players you talked about, you had Keith Millard, John Randall, Joey Browner, Eric Studstill. I mean, they had a number of, and Millard and Randall were making
George Martin's younger brother.
That's true. They
had a second.
I'll have to look it up. They were. I know Millard and Randall were giving the Giants fits in that game lots of times. Sims got sacked.
Includes on 4th and 17. Sims got hit on that 4th and 17 play. 100%. I don't think people focus on that because it looks kind of like a simple play. I think Giants fans who look at that play. I think Giants fans who look at that play today and didn't see it live go, what's the big deal? Bobby Johnson's just sort of standing on the sideline and he just sort of catches the ball. It's kind of what Larry was saying. The game was going back and forth. It was going back and forth. And then in the Giants' last drive, it seemed like everything was just touch and go. Sims dropped a shotgun snap and just got the ball off. It seemed like they were just scratching just to keep the marker, getting first downs. And it got to this 4th and 17. And again, we're playing this really good defense in 4th and 17 at home. And the crowd was going crazy. You figure it's over. And on that play, Sims got smacked and he threw a perfect pass that it looks simple, but there was a lot going on at the time. There was a lot of chaos. And at the time, Giants just didn't make plays like that. We've talked about all the wide receiver issues that they had.
Right.
And it was a huge deal at the time. So if you're a younger person and you see 4th and 17 and you go, I've seen better. What's the big deal? It was a big deal at the time.
I'll say the easiest part of that entire thing is the actual catch. Everything else, though, where he throws it, how he even gets the ball to begin with, to put it where he did, it looks simple. That's a very long throw from where he's throwing because it's not straight distance down the field. It's distance and then out wide. So it's the length and then the width out wide. That is a long throw that he is throwing out there, and he puts it perfectly anywhere inside. Defenders can get over there and get to it. If it goes a little too high, he's on the sidelines, he's out of bounds. That was a perfect throw. Johnson just had to catch it. It was right in his hands.
And he threw before the break. The pass was thrown before he made his break, too.
And he had to arc it because Johnson found a dead spot in the zone coverage. He had to get it over the defensive back who's playing under. And if you see it, Isaac Holt, he's like, reach it. The ball just goes over his fingertips, and then Johnson makes the basket catch, and then the safety came in late from behind and knocked him out of bounds. but it was all of that, the timing and the, throwing it before the break and the pass rush and getting hit by Millard and getting it over the back who was playing under.
And I maybe I'm romanticizing this and remembering it differently, but I thought the crowd was going bananas on 4th and 17, and I thought they got really quiet after 4th and 17. And maybe I was just so happy and was celebrating. And then Raul Allegri came out, and I think a few plays later, I don't think it was much longer than that.
Yeah,
maybe
they ran a couple of plays.
Yeah, and then they kicked the field goal, and it was like, oh my God, we won the game.
Yep.
And this starts a bunch of nail biter, come from behind, or last drive type situation games.
It's the first of 3 incredible games in Giants history, and it's amazing that they strung them together. And I have a really good post-game quote from Brad Benson where he said, I think the major difference between winning and almost winning is mental. Attitude counts for a lot, especially when you go into a game knowing you're the better team. And this is where, my personal opinion, this is where the 86 Giants put all the bad things that happened to them in 85 behind them, where they're going through this cauldron of playing good teams on the road, winning on the West Coast, and being injured and being one-dimensional on offense. And they just grit their teeth and they show this resolve. They have guys playing hurt, jaws wired shut, cracked ribs, and they're like, we're just going to do it. And we know the other teams know that we're going to run the ball, and we don't care. We're going to run it anyway. And we're not going to play 8 men in the box, and we're still going to stop the run with 3 down linemen. And this is, this game and the next game and the next game. And it's just fantastic. These 3 games, the Minnesota game, the next one, and the one, they're my probably three favorite regular season Giant games ever.
Mm. And the string of them and the way they were, and just each game really meant something. It's not just, hey, they won, the 22 team makes the playoffs, but if you go back and look where they won games, we enjoyed it, right? But they won games here and there, and they beat some teams. Like they beat Carolina, they won that game. Okay, great. They Tennessee, which was kind of lucky that they missed the field goal at the end of the game, and we were even back in the game for a 2-point conversion. These are different. This was almost a gauntlet of games that they had to go through. Yeah. These other teams were teams. They may not have been, Super Bowl contenders. Some of them were though. And the difference between them possibly going is the fact that they had to play the Giants and didn't make it through. Right. But the Giants they were tough, physical, huge games week after week. And this next one is certainly that, because it ultimately is a preview. And that's the Denver Broncos come to town. You saw the quick little highlight at the beginning. George Martin's interception is the one that will be remembered for forever. But this game was a back and forth game, and Denver was more than holding their own in this game.
Their defense was really good, especially against the pass. They gave Phil Simms fits. He talked about after the game and up before the Super Bowl how tough the Broncos defense was, and their defensive coordinator was the one who had mentored Bill Belichick.
Another game that Phil Simms had minimal completions, 11. Phil Simms had 11 completions in the game. Sorry.
And, well, I want to throw 2 things out there. One, the only touchdown the Giants scored in this game was by George Martin. There were no offensive touchdowns from the Giants in this game. And before we dump on Simms too much, the George Martin play, somebody posted a thread this week on BBI saying, what was your favorite play or plays from this season? And boy, that's hard to come up with. But I have to still say that just George Martin play is my favorite, just because it was so dramatic at the time. I mean, I remember back in the day, the NBC used to tease their upcoming games. Even though the Giants were on CBS, they would used to tease games and with highlights from the last week. And I just watched NBC that week just so I could see the George Martin play again, because I knew they were going to pick the George Martin play with the audio, and I just wanted to hear it again. But I think what gets lost in this game is the play Phil Simms threw to McConkey that won the game late with another field goal. I think the game tied at that point, or we were behind or
Yeah,
tied.
Broncos had tied it.
I think it was tied.
It was looking like
Yes.
overtime.
And Sims hit McConkey in a big play and for like 46 yards, and that set up the field goal for this. So, John, you're 100% correct. Rough game for Phil Sims, but that one play was, and it probably amounted to a third of his. What did you say his yardage was? Or was it his total game yardage in that game was what?
For Phil, he had 100 and change. Phil McConkey had 54 yards on two receptions.
Right, and 40. So what I'm saying is 46 yards of Phil's 100 and whatever came on one play, but it was the play that basically won the game for them.
Yeah, see, he had 148. So 46 of the 148 was on that one.
So a third of the yards he had came on that one play, but that play ended up winning the game. But that George, to me, I still just remember the George. I mean, it's so iconic. If you're putting it the top 10 Giants plays in history, I don't know how you don't put the George Martin play in the top 10.
Yeah, the amazing thing about that was the defense was so gassed because they were on the field so long.
Yes.
The Broncos had a drive that ended in a punt. The Giants had a one-play drive. Sims completed a pass to Stacy Robinson. He lost a fumble. The Broncos went on a long drive. I think it was 10 plays, 9 plays or 10 plays. They kicked the field goal. The Giants get the ball. Tony Galbraith lost a fumble on first down. The Broncos get the ball on the Giants side of the field. They're driving. They're inside the 20, and then it's inside the 2-minute warning. It looks like they're going to score just before the half, and that's when the George Martin play happened.
And for those who saw it live, I love George Martin, but that play took forever. I mean,
I think it was 16 seconds. I read in one of the newspapers, a 16-second play because they were all so tired. But the funny thing is, not like the Broncos' offensive players must have been tired too because they were on the field taking those snaps. And it took forever.
Well, the thing is John Elway made a mistake by trying to tackle him high. He tried to get him, and George Martin just sort of, he should have gone low on him.
Lawrence Taylor did absolutely nothing. He's running alongside.
Give me
the lateral. And, Mark Collins had a beautiful block. Harry Carson had a beautiful block. And Lawrence Taylor.
There was a risk of a clip on that play, though. I was like, don't.
It was close. It was so close.
It was a good no flag. But the first player Lawrence Taylor hit was George Martin in the end zone where he comes over on top of him.
I know.
Contributed nothing.
the thing with the Broncos and why there really wasn't anybody else to kind of do it. If you look at it, if it were today's game, I'd say it was almost like Elway had an option of either giving it a run or a pass in this game, but it was more of a designed, I'm going to throw it to the back quickly coming out. The line was going forward. They were literally going forward. They were inviting the George Martin and the defense to come around the ends. So when Elway goes to throw it, he's literally looking to throw kind of an inside around the rusher to catch the back, and all of his linemen are blocking forward instead of dropping back into pass pro. They're kind of moving forward. George Martin just does that, just pirouette, athletic, just sticks his hand out. And Elway really, he just didn't do enough with the ball that Martin would. There are very few really good offensive players that would make that catch. There are unbelievably minuscule amount of defensive players that would make that catch. George Martin's play at his age, by the way, he wasn't a 25-year-old. This dude, what is he, 35 at that point? 34, 35?
Yeah.
This was
his 11th
crazy.
season.
It's crazy. It would be my favorite play from this season if it wasn't for the next week.
I know you too well, John. By the way, before we move on from this, it was Larry. You're going to know this too. Wasn't it like George Martin's 5th career defensive touchdown?
7. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
7.
He held the NFL record. Yeah. He never scored another one after this. He ended his career with 7, and it was the. Who was the defensive end for the Miami Dolphins in the 90s and early 2000s?
Jason Taylor?
Jason Taylor
broke it. He ended his career with 8.
Now,
did he really? I did not know that.
To be clear, I just want to make sure. Was it 7 defensive touchdowns or as a defensive player? Because he had a touchdown reception as a tight end.
Yes.
6 as a defensive player. And 1.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Todd.
it was that 1980 game against Dallas that they won. That's why you remember that.
Yes.
He was the 3rd tight end, and he caught the pass. It was like a 1-yard touchdown catch.
And if you think about it, right, the Giants did this. They did it often. They used players from the defense where they would play them especially on special teams. They on the field goal team, they had them in the ends, but they would run them out on fake field goals. Carl Banks had a catch. I mean, they ran LT on one that it was in 90. He had that chance to, and they just didn't complete it, but he was open. They've done that kind of stuff, and that was a Parcells Belichick kind of thing that carried over to the Patriots. Mike Vrabel became a hugely effective player in that position, even when he wasn't being covered by Rossini. But anyway, I digress.
Yep.
So
I have one more good post-game quote from this game, and this is Harry Carson speaking up. And again, it's going back to that Giants confidence where they're overcoming adversity. They're winning close games instead of losing them late. And he's also, I believe, referring to George Martin, who was his best friend on the team. But Harry Carson said, "It seems like it's someone different every week. It feels like we're going to make the big play."
And this is when it's, to me, I don't want to put words in your mouths. This is where I'm starting to feel like the team might be, I hate to use this phrase, team of destiny. You're starting to get this feeling. It's starting to build that, of the games that we were talking about before this, they were kind of ugly. Some of them were very ugly. We talked about the passing game problems.
Sure.
But now it seems like they're starting to win games, like even when the odds seem to be stacked against them in situations, and they're just finding a way to win. And it seems like it's starting to build into something. So even though they've only lost 2 games, they didn't peak yet, and now they're starting to peak. To me, as a fan back then, I was starting to, after the 49er game in particular, it's like, whoa, this we might have a shot here.
For me, that was the one.
Yeah,
the 49er game?
Yeah, I agree too.
Okay.
The Bronco game was one thing because at the time I wasn't really looking ahead that it was the Broncos that we would be facing.
No,
right? Because you still had the gauntlet of the NFC to go through.
You had the 49ers, the Redskins, yes.
And the 49ers just always seemed to be that team that, they would do something that would just give the Giants fits. And even though we beat them in the playoffs, this was on their turf. And the reason to me, this game was, and maybe different for Larry, the overall piece, but this game started out so badly. It was Monday Night Football again. The Giants are not, historically, we're not good on Monday Night Football. Still are not good. Well, they're not good on any other day either.
It's a West Coast game, as Larry talked about.
West Coast
game.
And then it's the 49ers. And it's Bill Walsh, who seemed to have stuff for the Giants. And
he did in this game.
He did.
Yeah. And starting out 17. Yeah, they ran like a revert, end around on the goal line. To start out 17-0, and the Giants just not looking that good. I'm like, oh man, this is bad.
Yeah. So this was a game that the 49ers had circled on their calendar because they remembered what the Giants did to them in the 85 wildcard game where they beat them up physically. Joe Morris ran for 140 yards. This game, the 49ers switched up from their normal 3-4 front to a 4-3, and they game planned to shut down the Giants' running game, which they pretty much did. Everybody, I think, knows the legend of Club 13.
Club 13.
But the one thing, as I'm reading about this, is that it's not like a 4-3 front was that exotic. 3 of the teams in the Giants division, the Cowboys, the Redskins, and the Eagles, were 4-3 teams. Right. And they had played the Vikings 2 weeks ago. The Vikings were a 4-3 team. I'm still not sure what was so confounding about the 49ers.
They just weren't prepared for it, I think, against this opponent. They just didn't game plan.
Okay, so the first couple of drives are all right, 4-3. Morris ran the ball really well against Washington and Philadelphia, who had excellent defenses and were 4-3 teams. But was it the soft sod field at Candlestick Park combined? I don't know. But the Giants really struggled to move the ball in the first half until the third quarter, and they did it through the air.
I'm sorry. Just so if fans don't know, the Club 13 reference is the Giants had 13 yards rushing, or Joe Morris had 13 yards rushing in this game. So after this game, and when the Giants are going to play the 49ers later on in the playoffs to inspire the team, Parcells called his offensive line club 13 because they only got 13 yards. So that's the reference there. This is an old saying, but in this game it was particularly true. This was a game of two halves. The first half was as bad as it could possibly be for the Giants, and as good as it possibly could be for the 49ers. And the absolute reverse was true in the second half of this game. So at halftime, it's 17-0. You're embarrassed. You're like, what is going on? We've been playing well and the laying egg like this. And then I'll let John go to his favorite play here, but that's what turned the whole thing around.
It was a simple play. It's a simple pass play over the middle of the field. Bavaro makes the catch. And then every one of the 49ers defense gets a shot at him for the most part. A couple of them get multiple shots. Ronnie Lott gets to go for a ride. I mean, you're talking some borderline Hall of Famers. I mean, Lott's a definite Hall of Famer. A number of other high-level players on that San Francisco defense. Bavaro's carrying them down the field. It is just one after the other, and he drag it going. And even the Al Michaels and Frank Gifford and I think Dan Deerdorf was in the booth at that time. It was just such a thing, and you could just tell things had changed. And the Giants went for the first time in a while during this season where they went heavy pass in the second half and lit them up. Phil Simms had well over 300 yards passing. Stacey Robinson gets a big catch. Well, one that it's amazing he actually ended up with the ball. He should have caught it cleanly, but he gets a touchdown. Joe Morris gets a touchdown reception. I mean, this team and Phil Simms turning it around, but it was all from the energy that came from Mark Bavaro's play over the middle of the field.
Mark Bavaro had the inspiring play that elevated everybody. But I think the most important play of the game was on the next drive when it was 17-7. The Giants were stuck with a 4th and 1 at midfield, and they decided to go for it instead of punting the 49ers deep. And this is the one play. So the Giants in this game had 19 rushes for 13 yards. This 4th and 1 play, which was a sweep around the right end, Chris Godfrey pulled, and he and Carthon created enough of a hole. Joe Morris gained 17 yards. Wow. And then the next play was a touchdown pass. But even Parcells said after the game, everyone's asking about Bavaro, and he said, talking about the 4th and 1 play, if we don't get that one, we probably don't win the game.
And
it's also amazing. The Giants finished the game 19 rushes for 13 yards. You take out that 17-yard rush, they have 18 carries for minus 4 yards or something ridiculous.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. And do the math here, fans listening. The Giants had 17 yards on one rush and 13 yards for the game. That's how bad the running
finished the game
was.
At 13.
Yeah. Two things on this game before we move on, because we got to keep this going. There have been Giants players in their history that wide receivers that are teases. And to me, one of those teases has been Stacey Robinson. But this was one of the games that Stacey Robinson came through for the Giants on, because I don't think it was just that one catch. Didn't he actually? He had
another long one.
He had another long play.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that kind of gets lost in this game is the 49ers were leading 17-0 at halftime. They didn't score in the second half. So the Giants defense shut out the 49ers at home in the second half of this game, and that kind of gets lost in the Mark Bavaro and the Phil Simms coming back. So this was an amazing – I'm sorry?
The third quarter was all 3 and outs. The 49ers had the ball first. 3 and out, punted, the Bavaro play, 3 and out, the 4th and 1 17-yard run, another 3 and out, another Giant touchdown. And the Giants almost buried them in the third quarter. They were going on another drive. Simms threw to Bavaro, and he's, doing his thing, trying to run through traffic and run over tacklers. He fumbled at the 6-yard line.
Bavaro doesn't fumble.
It could have been 28-17. But then in the fourth quarter, the Giants went back to the first quarter. They couldn't move the ball at all. The Giants played some bend but don't break. The Niners had 2 long drives. They had a 14-play drive and a 10-yard drive that went into Giants territory, but they stopped them on 4th down both times. But it was a nail-biter finish. Had Bavaro held on to that ball at the end of the third quarter, it wouldn't have been a 3 or a 4-point game. They could have been up 28-17.
And what's lurking in the back of my mind watching this, and I'm panicking watching this game when they're down 17-0, is this. Again, I remember I at the time, remember my bias is I think extremely highly of the Washington Redskins. We're going back and forth with them each week. They're winning, we're winning. This game is right before the Redskins game in RFK for the division. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if we lose this game going into that game, we're not going to win the division. The Redskins are going to win the NFC East. So I think we also should not lose sight of the fact that while this was a gigantic game for all the reasons that we mentioned, how exciting it was, if they lose this game going into RFK, this could have been really disastrous too.
Sure.
So this was a big game for a number of reasons too.
Yeah, the Redskins would have evened up the tiebreaker. The Redskins hadn't lost since that Monday night game at Giant Stadium.
Right.
They were on a roll. They were 11-2. The Giants were 11-2. The Bears were winning. They were 11-2. This was a huge, huge game.
And I was getting mad every week because the Giants were winning, but the Redskins weren't losing. I was like, God, lose, you know.
So you've got a matchup of 2 teams now. So leave San Francisco, going to Washington. You got a matchup of 2 teams battling for the division, all the things you just mentioned. But you also got 2 players that are battling potentially for Defensive Player of the Year, for the sack leader for the season. They're the 2 leaders in sacks. So you got Manley, you got Taylor. There's a lot going on in this game. And once again, there's one thing about Bill Parcells you could always count on is the Giants would always play well in Washington. Didn't always win, but we more often than not, we did win the games that we needed to, and always played well. And this team, and it was always somebody else. If it wasn't Odessa Turner, Phil McConkey's making catches. I mean, there's always somebody. In this case, it was McConkey had a game, but LT was one who always showed up in Washington, and this was his game.
He loved playing the Redskins, and he was I couldn't believe he didn't win NFC Defensive Player of the Week for a second time after this game.
He didn't win that?
Came into it.
Oh my God!
He had 3 sacks, a forced fumble. I'm not sure who won Defensive Player of the Week, but it wasn't LT. But Dexter Manley was leading the NFL in sacks coming in at 17.5. Lawrence Taylor had 16.5. Lawrence Taylor had 3 in this game, and Brad Benson pretty much shut Dexter Manley out. I think he finished the game with 2 tackles, and I think barely even had any pressures on Sims.
And Lawrence Taylor's playing against Joe Jacoby. He's playing against one of the
was
best
a pretty darn good left tackle.
He's an awesome player. And wasn't Brad Benson's? Didn't he name one of his dogs Dexter?
Yes.
I think that was like after the NFC Championship.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Yes.
What stood out to me with this game is this, and everyone knows I'm an old guy I think this was one of the most important Giants regular season games that they've ever played while I've been a fan. I think there have been other games in the ballpark, like in 2011 when we played Dallas late in the year. Remember, Dallas had that lead against us, and we beat them twice down the stretch in 2011 to get into the playoffs. I would argue that this game was one of the top Giants regular season games ever. I was scared to death going into this game because I had so much respect for the Redskins going into this game, and the Giants dominated this football game. As Larry just said, Lawrence Taylor, as good as the sack numbers sound, he was in the backfield constantly.
The whole defense, they were in Schrader's lap the whole game. I think they finished the game with 7 sacks or 8 sacks, 6 interceptions. This was another 7 takeaway game for the defense. But the really interesting thing, and if you can find this game on YouTube, they have the Summerall and Madden pregame chat. You can hear in Madden's voice, he had a really good pregame conversation with Parcells. He said, I've never heard Parcells speak like this before. And he said the Giants, I think it was Ron Earhart, found something in the Redskins defense where they could exploit the deep middle, not the usual zone like around the numbers, but between the numbers, in between the hashes, they felt they could exploit it. And Madden said Parcells wants to throw the ball, and he wants to throw it often, and he wants to throw it deep. And conversely, he had also talked about Joe Gibbs. And, the Giants had played the Niners, and they weren't prepared for the 4-3. They didn't adjust to it, 13 yards rushing. Parcells and Earhart pre-guessed that the Redskins were going to try to stop Morris in the run game, so they countered that by coming out throwing. And the first drive of the game, the Giants threw the ball every play. Bavaro had catches. I think Mowat caught a pass. And then it was either Robinson or Johnson open deep right at the corner of the end zone, and it was just underthrown a touch. And it was intercepted by Darrell Green. But the Giants, they weren't deterred, talking about their confidence and overcoming. They just kept throwing it. They had they were up 14-7 just before the half, and they almost scored again, where Sims had Bavaro so open between the hashes. There was no Redskin within 20. It was a walk-in touchdown, and he just overthrew it. But the Giants led 14-7 at the half. It could have been 28-7, and Sims could have had a monster game.
Right, and
it's almost like a prelude to the Super Bowl game plan where they're going to come out throwing.
And it's obvious why the Redskins would do that, because they had Joe Morris had 181 yards in the first game against them. And to me, the pass that Phil threw to McConkey for the touchdown was the best pass, one of the best passes in Phil's career. McConkey was covered by Darrell Green, and he was not open. Mm-hmm. That pass had no business being completed.
And he bobbled it for a second before he pulled it in.
But I don't even, to this day, if you watch that play, I don't know how that pass gets to him. And I think that's the play where after he scores, the iconic where Bavaro comes up and picks up his friend.
Him up.
Actually lifts him up the ground like he's like nothing. He just lifts him up. And Larry, I know you're a huge fan of collecting Giants magazines. One of the best Sports Illustrated pictures I've ever seen in my life is the photography from this game. And there's a picture of Joe Morris, a full-page picture of Joe Morris running up the middle. It's 2 pages.
Yeah,
and it's
he was jumping
off on the photographs I've ever seen in my life. I know you know which one I'm talking about, but it's one of the best pictures I've ever seen in sports history. It's an amazing photograph.
Yep. It is a good one. It's a really good one.
And that cover aren't the Giants on that cover too? Aren't
Bavaro? Yeah, it's Killer Giants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, the signature play from the season, it always seemed like it was Sims the Bavaro over the middle. In the Super Bowl or in some key game, it was that seam pass. Version of the seam pass where he's and then Burrow gets in the end zone and he's crossing himself, and and that was one of those that was a picture from that game too.
So Giants dominate defensively, get all over it. Giants win this game. I'm going to try to tighten it a little bit so we can, because we're going a little long. So
I need to mention one thing before we move on. So this game, Fred Benson, NFC Offensive Player of the Week.
First
the guy with the Band-Aid on the only, 40 years later, the only lineman from either conference to win the Player of the Week.
I did not know that. I knew he won. It was the first time. I didn't know no one's ever won it.
Nobody's won it since.
And to answer what you were mentioning earlier, why LT didn't win, I don't have the why, but I know the who. Art Still was the AFC Defensive Player of the Week. Leonard Smith was the Defensive Player of the Week for the Cardinals. So, And speaking of the Cardinals, we'll mash them together. We'll mash the Cardinals and the Packers together for the next 2 games that the Giants have, and the Giants are rolling. They struggled a little bit with Green Bay. There was some stuff. There is an interesting thing with the Green Bay piece that we'll get in the Green Bay game that I'll get to in a sec. But those 2 games together, the Giants ultimately, they kind of dominate. They score 77 combined points in those 2 games, solidifying a 14-2 season. Anything from those 2 games specifically you want to touch on real quick before we get to the postseason?
I'll let Larry go
first. The Giants
were
flexing a bit. They came through the cauldron, and then they had 2 of the lower tier teams in the NFC, and they matter-of-factly took care of business. The big takeaway, I think, is they didn't play down to the level of their competition, which they had done in 84 and 85 and a little bit early in the year sometimes, but they just took care of business. And I was very happy with the Green Bay game because I was home from college, and that was the first game I got to attend that year. And I still remember my seats were in the end zone in the lower tier. The Giants were at the far end of the field going the other way when they blocked the punt, and Tom Flynn reached behind him and caught it and chugged into the end zone. So I had a pretty good view. It was going away from me, but I still remember seeing that vividly from my seats. I had a great view of it, and he chugged it into the end zone. And it's, of course, on the highlight video, the camera's in front of him, and he can see his eyes popping as he's running in. But that game was just so much fun. I know the Packers came back a little bit, but the Giants, Zeke Mowat had a touchdown in this game. I think Lee Rouson had a touchdown in the fourth. The Giants emptied the bench in the fourth quarter, and they still just poured it on. So it was a lot. It was a lot of fun.
I just wanted to mention the same thing that Larry did. It was the punt, and again, they let them get back in the game. And Parcells, we all heard in America's game, he freaked out at halftime. They just dominated in the second half. But to me, that block punt was the signature play from that game, and that was so cool. And just a quick little side note, after the Giants won the Super Bowl, again, because I'm in D.C., they visited the White House. And I went to the White House outside the gate to see if I could see them. And there were two people I ran into. One was Tom Flynn's brother, who looked just like Tom Flynn, and he was shocked. I go, "You look like Tom Flynn," and he was amazed that I knew who he was. And the other one was Ernest Borgnine was going into the White House to see the Giants that day. That's Ernest Borgnine from the Poseidon Adventure.
Here's a little trivia, and now it could go deeper. I don't know deeper. I know this specifically. So I'm going to keep it modern. So since 1980, the Giants have had two players that have had a special teams touchdown in the last regular season game and then the first game of the following season. Who are those two players?
Well, Tom Flynn is one.
Okay.
Special team touchdown?
They've scored on special teams. I'm not saying it's not the same.
Dave Meggett?
Dave Meggett would be the other. He returned a punt against the Raiders and then opened with the punt against the Eagles in the following season.
Okay, I just guessed, but that was
well done. Okay. Well done.
Yeah, well done.
There you go. Okay, so we wrap up the season. Again, it was a little bit. LT finishes 20.5 sacks. He's NFL's Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he's the MVP, but that kind of doesn't get announced a little bit later. But I mean, the season that he had, he could have had more sacks. I think, quite honestly, there was different points in the season where he could have had it, but he pulled some games were just monster games together. 20.5, he finishes. The Giants 14-2, roll into the playoffs. You get a home division game against the vaunted San Francisco 49ers, the second year in a row that we get them at home in the playoffs. This one started a little funky for the Giants. Could have gone a different way. It was probably the one highlight of Jerry Rice's career that he wishes was not there. And then the Giants absolutely obliterated the 49ers. Thoughts about that game, because we want to kind of keep it, because everybody knows kind of, but we'll keep it a little bit tighter. I know we're 2 hours in. It's kind of hard to keep it tight, but thoughts on that game?
I was at this game, and 6 of the Giants' 7 touchdowns were in my end zone. They weren't going away this time, but the Jerry Rice fumble, that was coming toward me, and I saw it happen. And when I think the ball popped out of his pads like around the 25-yard line, and it goes to about the 10. A bunch of players jump on it. It goes in the end zone, and then there's a pile. The Giants come out of it, and then they go on an 80-yard drive, and then it was just the blowout pretty much started right there. But symbolically, and I wrote about this in the article that I did, Burying the Ghost, about 10 years ago. It's on the BBI history section. But that place where Jerry Rice lost the ball, it's very, very close to the same place in the field where Pisarcik and Zonka had that fumble in 78. And I get one of the Giants' bugaboos. I felt like, symbolically, that's kind of like a big exorcism for the Giants, where they're really just getting rid of all the ghosts of the past. And they gave they lost a fumble, and that just blew the whole organization up. And then here's a fluke fumble happening in their favor, and it's this tremendous blowout. It's the third, at the time, it was the third largest margin of victory in the NFL postseason game, the 49-3. And that, Bill Walsh after the game said, we were just shattered. We were absolutely shattered. And the way the Giants played today, it would be an upset if they didn't win the Super Bowl.
And it was somewhat windy that day too. So the passing games weren't great per se. Sims had 4 touchdown passes on 9 completions.
That's a good percentage.
You'll take that. That Joe Morris, though, dominated that huge run for the touchdown in the first half, really turned everything trying to turn from there. And the Giants defense was just amazing in that game.
They were
I know you were
phenomenal.
going to say something there.
Yeah, there were just four quick points I want to make about this game that stand out to me. One is what you just brought out, John, was that touchdown. But going into the game that sort of set this up, Terry Kennard had been lost for the year after he tore his ACL in the Redskins game.
Yes.
And that really scared me as a fan because I knew our secondary was a little bbit weak. And that kind of came into play on the Jerry Rice play because Herb Welsh went with Jerry Rice and they took advantage of that. But what's I thought where the game really turned around was Herb Welsh's interception when Montana was getting smacked, and he sort of lateraled it, I think, to Elvis Patterson. Elvis Patterson. And then the very next play, Joe Morris has that long touchdown run. I thought the combination of the interception with the touchdown run back to back just took all the air out of everyone says the Jerry Rice play took the air out of the 49ers. I felt that sequence took the air out. And two quick things. Sims only had 9 completions, 4 of them were touchdowns. He got smacked, I think, on at least 2 of those where I don't think he even saw the ball getting completed. He was laying on his back. And I think, John, when we interviewed him, I think he said did he say he had a concussion on one of those?
Let's put it this way. Everything he said says that you would be diagnosed with a concussion. I don't know use the word. He kind of said it in a way that said he blacked out.
Yeah. So Phil Sims, people say 4 touchdowns, 9 completions. Not only that, but he completed a couple of those that were really tough. He had one touchdown was called back as of a holding penalty, and they still got a touchdown because he made a great throw. The last thing is again, is something that you and I have focused on. This was Carl Banks's coming out party game.
Yes.
He dominated this football game. I mean, it was to this day, I will still go back, watch this game just to watch Carl Banks. So I know we want to keep it moving, but those were my 4 points.
No, 100%. He dominated the outside. We looked at a lot of the highlights, and when we talked to him about it, it was textbook. Stand the tight end up, shed him, make the tackle, and everybody else would flow. The 49ers tried everything they could because they weren't going to be able to just pass the ball on the Giants. That was one of the things. They didn't want to expose their offense to have to be just being rushed all the time. They tried to run the ball to kind of keep it under control a little bit. They couldn't do it. They could not get outside at all. The linebacking core was just everywhere in that game, but Carl owned the outside. A start of a run for him that you and I have talked about it, one of the most dominant defensive runs in postseason history that I've seen by one guy. And that's not LT. That was Carl Banks. LT makes the flashier play, but Carl Banks owned that line of scrimmage, owned the running games in this game, the Washington game, and in the Super Bowl.
And then also this again, I want everyone to focus on the big picture. The Giants have been playing these nail biters, but they dominated the Redskins in RFK.
Yep. They
kind of swept easily past the Cardinals and Packers. This game was a joke. They don't have too much problems with Washington. It was a little bit, they could have been dicey at times. And then, of course, it was close at halftime, but they dominate the Super Bowl. But at this point of the season, the Giants just seem like a steamroller at this point. From the Redskins game on till the end, they're crushing people now.
Yeah, exactly.
I still have my ticket stub from this game.
Oh, nice.
There you go. What was that?
NFC Division Playoffs, $24. Can you even get a beer in MetLife Stadium for $24?
Jesus. I can't even get a ticket to a crappy movie for $20. Like, wow. Damn.
Okay.
I won't even tell you what I paid to go to games this year. So
Yes.
anyway,
I hope you got some money back.
Well, I mean, this coming year, I've already paid. So we'll see. But
this year they might be worth it.
Which brings us to the Redskins again.
The NFC Championship game, 3
Still
times
got my
the charm.
tickets stub.
Look at you, man. Look at that.
$29. Can you believe that gouging?
Yes,
$5 more.
They jacked it up.
Stadium.
That's awesome. Oh, man. So 3rd time's the charm. In this case, usually it's not. You don't want to play the same opponent 3 times. It tends to not go your way. I mean, if you split them, it's open game. You win both of them, it's always a bad omen, supposedly. This was not the case here. Now, weather played a huge role. It was windy as hell in this game. That got clicked. But the wind seemed to affect – it affected the Washington game plan, I think, more than it probably should have. When you watch Jay Schrader throw the ball in the wind, he was gunning it in the wind. Gary Clark dropped the pass that could have been a touchdown. Jay Schrader could throw it. They just couldn't but they couldn't do a lot of intermediary stuff. He was not great from like the line of scrimmage to about 5 to 7 yards. He was much better 20, 30 yards down the field. Jay Schrader was that guy. He's kind of he was the pre-Jeff George, if that's how you want to look at it. The Giants defense just did not give them the opportunity. The offense scored when they needed to, took the win, scored right away, didn't have to do a whole lot after that. And the Giants defense just said, it ain't happening. But the Giants got banged up in this game too, though. That was something that thank God Super Bowl was 2 weeks away, because they did get nicked in this game.
Lawrence Taylor took a helmet to the knee from Harry Carson in the 3rd quarter. He pretty much missed the rest of the game. He was out for series. He tried to come back, but he was slow. He was limping, and they took him out. They put Carl Banks in Lawrence Taylor's spot, and they put Hedden in Banks' spot. Banks was still a terror. He almost looked like 56 wearing 58. Yeah. He was pass rushing like nobody's business. He was the 3 playoff games. Banks was just such a force. And how many players are there where you could take out Lawrence Taylor, put in anybody, and not miss a beat? And it's, and again, it was Banks going against Joe Jacoby, who's a hell of a left tackle. It was really a phenomenal defensive performance. And
Parcells did something that a lot of teams didn't do back there then. I don't remember them doing it. Is he decided to kick off because he wanted to play the wind, and the punting game was gigantic in this game because Sean Landeta was masterful kicking into the wind, and the Redskins punter could not kick into the wind. I think he had like a 12-yard punt or something at one point. I thought there was one time when the ball went backwards.
For under 30 yards, and it was the Giants' second possession where they ended up scoring a touchdown. They got the ball inside Redskins territory because it was like a 24-yard punt.
And it wasn't because their punter stunk. It was the wind was so bad.
He couldn't deal with the wind.
I don't think I've ever seen a punt get hung up in the wind like that and come back the way it was in that game. The other thing that stood out in this game to me, it was something Larry alluded to earlier when he was talking about George Rogers. To me, one of the plays of this game was the short yardage play where the Redskins went for it, and the Giants defense I think they needed, like, it was almost like they needed like 2 or 3 inches. It wasn't even a full yard. It was very short. And the Giants just stuffed Rodgers. And I don't remember if it was 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1. I don't remember.
It was actually both.
Okay.
The Redskins were 0 for 18 in this game on 3rd and 4th downs. They were 0 for 14 on 3rd down. They were 0 for 4 on 4th down. And Bill Parcells said after the game, when you hold a team in that department to 0 for 18, it's not perfect. It's a miracle. You get those 3 downs in punt series. It's artistic.
Oh, I didn't know. I guess I'd forgotten it was like that bad. Oh, my goodness. Is that ever been done before? 0 for 18.
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty dominant.
That's how you get a shutout.
And the other memory I have, 2 other memories from this game I have. One is just Joe Schrader collapsing at the end of the game. He'd been pummeled so much and so often in this game that he actually collapsed on the sidelines late in the game. The Giants just beat up the Redskins in this game, and the wind was going crazy. And for people who don't remember, the mayor of New York at the time refused to give the Giants a ticker tape parade if they were going to win the Super Bowl. So the fans decided on their own they were going to throw the Giants their own ticker tape parade. And that's why when you watch this game, you see so much toilet paper and programs and paper flying in the air. I remember my wife, who didn't grow up a Giants fan, she grew up a Bears fan. The first time she saw film from this, she goes, "What is all that crap floating in the air?" And Rain Arlington told her, "It's debris. There's debris floating. There's debris in New Jersey. It just floats around."
It's Jersey. It's Jersey.
Hey, but we threw our own parade for ourselves.
But my personal memory from this game is in my family, my mom has always been considered the kiss of death. So if there's a really important game going back, even when I was a baby or before I was born, if she wasn't allowed to be around when there was an important game. I remember when the Giants seemed to have this game locked up, and I said, "Mom, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. Come on in and watch." And I had that happen twice. And both times I had her come in, Maurice Carthon fumbled the ball away back to the Redskins. I said, "All right, that's it. Get out of this room."
He lost 2 in the fourth quarter when they're trying to run it out.
And that's when I had my mom come into the room to watch the Giants win the Super Bowl. And I said, "Get out of here. Get out of here. You're out of here." So.
Oh my God. All right. So we'll take it to the big game. Because we're gonna wrap this part up. And people know this. I mean, we know the Super Bowl, but let's talk about it real quick. Again, this was Phil Simms at this point. If you look at the way the season started and you look at where the struggles were, this is the exact opposite of all of that for Phil Simms. He couldn't possibly have been better in this game. 22 out of 25, 268, 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
He was as on could be. And the Giants still don't have like this like amazing group of receivers. Emmanuel's back, but I mean he's back. There's still Stacey Robinson, still Phil McConkey. It's Bavaro, it's Moa, it's the backs out of the backfield. But he was so on in that game. You just knew, even when they struggled a little early as a team, like the Broncos were still in it. Broncos were leading at one point, could have had a bigger lead, honestly, but the defense shut them down and on the goal line. Then Carlos misses a kick that you should have just could have. I mean,
was an extra point. Yeah.
Young Ho Koo could have made that kick. So
if he didn't kick the turf first.
Yeah, right. Even then, it's not that far. I mean, just chip it. Phil Simms though just wins the MVP, but this was his shining moment for the New York Giants.
And it was well earned. It was well earned for all the crap he went through, all the injuries early in his career, getting booed early in this season. The Cowboy game at home was probably the low point. And, Phil fought through adversity and he had resolve and he proved it. And it was one of the most well-earned MVPs, in my opinion.
Phil Simms was one of the most, until Daniel Jones, was one of the most hotly debated quarterbacks in Giants history. You either loved him or you hated him. And those people that had to swallow their hate when he won a Super Bowl reappeared later on when the Jeff Hostetler stuff appeared. But this was, if you were a Phil Simms fan, and I was, and to this day, and I love Eli, but to this day, Phil is still my favorite Giants quarterback because of the crap that he had to go through with the injuries, the fans, the surrounding talent. This was his crown. This was his vindication. And he was, for those who don't know, he still holds the record for the single game completion record in the Super Bowl. It's 88 point something %. And I think he had at least one drop of the 3 incompletions. I would argue one of them was a drop pass. He still holds the record, and it was to see him standing on the sideline at the end and knowing that he was the MVP. It it was more important for the Giants to win the game, and it was unbelievable. And it was surreal. I don't like to this day, it just doesn't even seem real to me that they won that day. But the icing on the cake was Phil was as good as he was that day. And again, you didn't really know because in the first half, the game was different. But as the second half progressed and then you started seeing the stat line, you were like, oh my God, because it was 10-9 in the first half. You weren't thinking, wow, Phil's playing this amazing game. But by the third end of the third quarter, it was like, holy cow, he's not, he's
I think it was 33-10
complete.
Yeah. The thing about Phil Simms that you just said, with Eli, it's an interesting flip, right?
Mm-hmm.
Phil comes to the Giants at a point where they're bad. They've been bad. Comes to a point, the Giants don't load up on talent around for Phil, right?
No.
They didn't get a superstar. I mean, their leading wide receiver was Ernest Gray at the time. They didn't have a superstar tight end. Their offensive line was meh. Their running game was nothing until ultimately Morris. They just had Rob Carpenter. I mean, Rob Carpenter was a bulked up fullback, playing halfback a little bit, and they used him as much as they could. And God love him, he did great for the Giants, but he was not a great running back.
They spent all their 86 draft picks on defense.
But Phil's career, he went through all the trials, tribulations, the really big problems when he had nothing. Stayed with it, and arced to where he wins the Super Bowls. Eli's biggest piece of negativity is on the backside of his career. Right. He's already won the Super Bowls. The Giants don't seem to be doing a whole lot to get talent in front of him. He's taken a beating, and now his career's kind of coming down. So his arc was different.
Right.
Phil's was low, and on its way up to when he reaches the pinnacle. Eli got to the pinnacle fairly early overall.
Midway through his career. Yeah, early and midway. Yep. And then
it progressively went down. So they had a different trajectories in their careers. But I agree with you. To me, and maybe it's because it's my childhood memories.
Yeah.
Phil is still my guy. He's still my quarterback. Well, until Jackson Darnold. But but he's still the guy that brought. I mean, this moment was just unbelievable. Now, I'll let us wrap up the football of this real quick because there's one other piece to this moment that I'm personally never, ever, ever going to forget. And I hope I never see a situation like it again. But let's just finish with the football part first.
Well, after the Phil McConkey's caught that deflected touchdown off of Mark Rivaro, and it was middle fourth quarter. I think that made it 33-10. Then it looked like the Giants finally had it wrapped up. I wasn't in Pasadena. I was in my friend's dorm room watching the game, and there happened to be a Polaroid camera handy. So they had me.
Oh, nice.
This is 18-year-old Larry in SUNY Morrisville. I was only 18, so I will not confirm what was in my Giants plastic mug.
Nice.
Water.
Yeah. So that was it. It was, the 15 years of lousy football, the Y.A. Tittle and losing to the Colts. And that was like the final exorcism. The ball bounces off Bavaro. McConkey scoops it. He gets his Super Bowl touchdown. And I could finally exhale. And it was like surreal. It's like, is this really happening? But it really happened. The Giants won a Super Bowl.
Nice.
I don't know why, but I wasn't that worried about this game when we were trailing in the first half. I normally, I would have been a nervous wreck, but I wasn't for some reason. And the third quarter, again, for those who are too young to remember, the Giants just absolutely just dominated. Denver, I don't even think got a first down in the third quarter. And the Giants,
it was like that 49er game. It was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out.
Yeah. And the Giants just went up and down the field. And my only other favorite, there are a lot of favorite memories from this. I just throw two weird ones because I think some people like the interesting things. One John has brought up before, but the first one is, I think it's the moment that you just talked about where McConkey caught the rebound. We all know the Giants had won the Super Bowl at that point. Bill Parcells is freaking out on the sidelines still. And I love that to this day where he's like, the game's not over.
Yeah.
You know, everyone, even like Johnny Parker's over there celebrating.
Who were the two players that he went and admonished that they were together?
Oh, I don't remember. But
do you know, Larry?
No, I don't.
Pepper Johnson and William Roberts, two Ohio State guys standing on the sidelines. They were doing their little dance thing, and he comes running over. He's like, no. Like, it was awesome.
I remember that dance, but I thought that was after the game. I didn't realize the game was
they were doing some stuff on the sidelines, and he came running over, and he was like, he was pissed. He was like, no.
Yeah. Well, then the defense gave up 10 points.
Yeah.
They let up.
And remember, there again, John Elway was this historically good, amazing quarterback. Again, they're playing, and Denver's defense is really good. And Herb Welsh is back there. And Herb Welsh, by the way, is one of the ones involved in that one of those long pass plays. But so at the very end of the game, I'm sitting in my college lounge, and everyone knows what a nut Giants fan I am, because Larry, just so you know, I used to cut out the back of the New York Post and Daily News and put those and tape those on my wall, so everyone knew I was a Giants fan, and knew not.
My bedroom was covered with that kind of stuff.
So everyone's starting to come into my room, and I'm like, I'm like this. So I'm celebrating, and then all of a sudden, the game's over, and I'm still watching, and all of a sudden, Phil McConkey's picking up a gun.
That's the play. That's what I was going to talk about.
Oh, I'm like, why is there a gun? Why does he have a gun? What is going on?
He's leaving the field. Like the game's over. They're all leaving. He stops. He turns around. He looks. He goes over. He picks. And I'm like, is he holding a gun? I'm like, what? A security guy dropped the gun on the ground. Phil McConkey picks it up.
And being ex-Navy, he knew how to handle.
He knew that's bad.
And it's been told many, many times. But again, for those who don't know it, this was the very first game that a player said, "I'm going to Disney World. I'm going to Disneyland" at the end, and it was Phil Simms. So that was the very first time that this happened.
Now, I'll say one thing about the third quarter, though, that the Giants dominated and all that stuff. Let's not forget, though, they went and called a fake punt that continued to drive, that ultimately from there, everything snowballed. Damian Johnson had a key block there. It was Jeff Rutledge took the snap, kept the ball, did the quarterback sneak.
Barely got it. He
didn't get it by a lot.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things the Giants did often. They did those the going for it on fourth down, the fake punts, the fake field goal against San Francisco, where they come up and they basically just get into shotgun. They spread out. Raul Allegre's were spread out. Mark, and the 49ers, they had no idea what to do with it. Like you've got Mark Bavaro lined up wide. You've got which should have told them something was up, because the Giants always had Taylor, Carson, Taylor, Banks were the ends on the field goal unit. All of a sudden, Bavaro was the end on the field goal unit. He kicks out wide. It was they were great at that stuff, but that play turned things around.
Did you guys feel that this game was over when Joe Morris scored? I felt that's when they'd won the game. I mean, I didn't normally get that cocky. I know I'm a Giants fan. I always think the game's not over. But for some reason in the Super Bowl, when Joe Morris scored in the third quarter, I thought the game was over. I mean,
for me, it was McConkey in the fourth. I was still nervous. I was still expecting something bad to happen. I wasn't quite over it yet.
Yeah. No. As soon as I had a feeling they were winning that game. The one game I was worried about, period, was the 49er one. I don't know why. Washington, I had a feeling. I felt that way all the time when they would play Washington. And then the Denver game, I just felt like we were just rolling at that point. If you look at it, 49 points against the 49ers. They 17 points against the Washington, against the Redskins. Without giving up any points, and then another 39 in the Giants, and go back 50 against Green Bay, 27 against the Cardinals. They were scoring points like left and right. I knew if they took a lead, this game was over. And when Joe Morris scored,
were you guys glad they didn't have to play the Bears?
I wanted them to play the Bears. I wanted the Redskins. I felt like the Redskins were the second best team in the NFC. Mm-hmm. I wanted the Bears. I wanted the Giants to play the Bears. in Giants Stadium for the NFC Championship game.
Mm.
They would have kicked the Bears' ass. There's no way the Bears were going to win. They were showing cracks late in the season. Doug, I think they led. First of all, they had the NFL softest schedule, and they had a ton of turnovers, especially with Flutie at quarterback. The Giants would have shut them out too. I have all the respect in the world for the Bears defense and Walter Payton, but there's no way the 86 Bears were beating the 86 Giants. I don't care what happened in 85.
They would have been a bigger disadvantage than Washington was, because they wouldn't have had a quarterback that could have thrown in the wind, period.
Who didn't have the arm strength that Schrader did?
Yeah, and Washington couldn't even do anything, but their passing game would have been nothing. They wouldn't even had. So no, I didn't worry about that at all. It was San Francisco for me was the team that I worried.
From a historical perspective, you would have liked Giants Chicago in the wind, and you would have loved that. That would have been talk about ghosts of the past there.
Sneakers game, baby.
Yeah,
that's wrong. Yeah. So I have two more artifacts I want to share with you guys. Yeah. So Ed Koch was a jerk. The Giants had their own Super Bowl celebration in the stadium. So they sent these out to the season ticket holders. I didn't go, obviously. I was up in Morrisville, but my mother mailed them to me. And it was a free pass for all season ticket holders to go and celebrate the Super Bowl in Giant Stadium.
Cool.
And then in the off season, the season ticket holders used to get this newsletter a couple times, Giants Touchdown. And they had this nice stuff about, Sims and the year of years. But talking about ticket prices and the price of success, 1987, the Giants' first championship in 30 years. Next year, your season tickets are going to cost a little bit more. So do you guys want to guess what the regular season ticket prices were for 1986?
No, gosh, I'm afraid to ask. $14.
Well, you saw the playoff. The playoffs were 24 and 29. So what were the regular season?
I was going to go with 20. I was going to go. The new price was 28. I was going to go with 28.
No. So the regular season in 86 were $14 and $17. And then in 1987, they were going to cost a whopping $18 and $21.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
So the price of a Super Bowl victory is $4.
That's less than the fees that I pay.
You can't buy a beer in MetLife for $21.
On Ticketmaster just to buy the tickets. I'm paying.
Yeah, the service fees would be over $21.
Jesus. Anyway. All right. Well, with that, is there anything else from the 86, which was just such a magical season? I mean, it's the year you guys graduated at 86 in June. I graduated June of 87. So 86 was my senior year, 86, 87. It was just such a great culmination of all the years of like dealing with stupid Cowboy fans of America's team, and the Steelers dominated earlier, and then the 49ers were big at that point, and even New England was winning in so if you're in the Northeast, which I lived in Vermont, there was a lot of New England fans, and they had been to the Super Bowl, and they were a winning team. To finally have the Giants and have that championship, it was like all was right in the world for a short amount of time, and just really an era for Giants. I think Giants fandom was probably one of the best times to be a Giants fan, was that 80s into early 90s.
Probably
it was like their second golden age. It was like the 1950s and the early 60s with Tittle and Gifford and Huff. We had Bavaro and Sims and Taylor, and 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, and a couple of other division titles and playoff berths and wild card wins. It was a really, really, special time to be a fan. It's what made me the diehard that I am today. These players, Eli Manning, probably the Giants' best quarterback, but Sims is my guy too. He's my favorite. These are the guys I grew up with, and they, I feel very sentimental talking about this 40 years later. It's, these guys, they're my guys. That's my team.
And the only analogy I can make, recent analogy, is if you were a huge New York Knicks fan and you saw what just happened with the Knicks, it's similar to what the Giants were, in the sense that the Knicks were such a joke for such a long time. and they weren't the team that was going to make the finals and win. And the Giants were, again, your parents talked about them, about how good they were in the 50s and the early 60s, and then how they became a joke in the 60s and 70s. And as John mentioned earlier, when we first started this, there were glimpses like in 81 or 84 where they got in a wild card game and a win. But, they were just not, they weren't like, again, one of these teams that you knew we were going to go to the Super Bowl or Super Bowl contenders. For them that go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, and there was no question that they were the best team. There's still fans today that say the 2007 New York Giants got lucky. It was fluky. If that guy doesn't drop the interception, the Giants aren't going to win that Super Bowl. There was no question, no doubt that the Giants were the best team in 1986. Of all the teams that have won the Super Bowl with the Giants, I'm not talking about the pre-Super Bowl teams, but of the Super Bowl era teams, they were the most dominant team. The other teams were great. Their wins, their seasons were miraculous, but this team, there was no question when they rolled through the playoffs that this was the best team in football, and they proved that. So it was stunning at the time, and then because John's going to bring up the wood stuff again, but because it was my first time and your first time, it's the most memorable. You know what I mean? It was just that, to me, it was still the most memorable of the Super Bowls because it was the first of them. And that we were talking about getting monkeys off your back all during this thing. It was like, oh my gosh, the Giants can be a Super Bowl team. And so to this day, I have a special place in my heart for this team, even though, the other, like the 2007 team was such a Cinderella team, and it's special too. This one was just special because it was the first.
And in the future, I won't say no that I'm going to do something.
Yes.
Before I hear everything that you say, because man, did you give me so much to work with? But
I know.
I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go.
No. Let's leave us on a clean note.
I'm as crazy a Giants fan as I know as well. I had two of my kids. One's middle name is Taylor. Her first name is Lexi, so I could have LT.
Yeah, right.
My son Zayden's middle name is Eli. So it's not because we're biblical in any way whatsoever. It's after Eli Manning. They were born, the triplets were born in August of 2007.
Right.
I know we're talking about the A16, but here's the thing. It's a number of people know this to be true. It's recorded somewhere. I don't have the recording anymore, but on a live radio broadcast on a sports show that I had back then, I gave a prediction, and the co-hosts, two of the co-hosts that I had with me at the time, said, be honest, give your real prediction of what it's going to be. And I said, okay, fine. The Giants are going to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl this year. I said that in August. And I went and I was at training camp in August. I got to be on the field for a couple of days, asked questions. I got to ask Eli and Tom Coughlin. And even all those things don't really resonate as much to me for my Giant fandom. As an experience as a person, it was something different. As the 86 Giants team, the season, everything, because it was all the years that led up to it. Like you said, it's all those years. Oh, Jesus. It's all those years of waiting for something to occur, and it finally did. And it not only did, but it didn't disappoint either. It was, it could have been a magical run and then finish like 2000 and be like, oh, we lose the big game. And that's happened to other teams, fans. Their team goes to, be a Bengals fan. They've been to the Super Bowl multiple times, lost every one of them. Be a Bills fan. The Giants went and they won. They didn't just win. They dominated. They dominated the season. They dominated the Super Bowl. And they stayed good and they won again, which is something that you see. Now, we haven't seen it in a long time as Giants fans, but to that 86, to me, that was a culmination of everything, and long-winded way of saying it'll always be my favorite team is that 1986.
Well, and again, none of us are old enough to have endured that much suffering. But I think we kind of had that, again, transmuted to us through our parents or family members that went through it longer. So I know personally, I carried the baggage that my father had watching the Giants in the 60s and 70s, because he communicated to me, and to this day, he still is one of these negative Giants fans. He expects the worst because he went through those two decades where, again, Larry was talking about this early in the podcast. The Giants didn't have a home playoff game for 22 or 23 years. They didn't win a division. They didn't win a division title during that time period, too. I mean, we're talking a long
was the last division title.
Yeah, and they were the butt of jokes, and this was the end of that, And they started in 84 and 85 was, again, they were starting to become respectable, but this put an end to it. They were beating Joe Montana, John Elway, we talked about Dan Fouts, Dan Marino. They were beating the legends. They were beating Phil Simms and Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks and Leonard. They were going in and beating the Reggie Whites and the Dick Butkus and not Dick Butkus. Who's the other Bears middle linebacker I'm trying to think of?
Mike Singletary.
They were beating the legends. They were beating these. The Giants were the team in prime time that was coming back and beating these teams. So it was just like, oh my gosh, we're the good team now. So it was amazing.
They earned it. It was those games in November, back to back to back, at Minnesota. Minnesota was a good team. They missed the playoffs, but they had a winning record, and they were a very good team. Then they beat the Denver Broncos at home, AFC West. The two best divisions of the NFL then were the NFC East and the AFC West.
Right.
The Broncos won the West, and they played the Giants in the Super Bowl. They beat them, and then they beat the 49ers, the legendary 49ers, in Candlestick Park, where the Giants hadn't won in forever, and they came from behind. And after those three games, the Giants just were a steamroller rolling downhill, and they kicked the Redskins' ass and all through the playoffs. And, I was at the two playoff games at home. They were great. Winning the Super Bowl was great. But I always go back to those three games, Minnesota, Denver, and San Francisco in the regular season. But those three games back to back to back were just some of the best football I've ever seen.
And so we have his games, John, and I've said that my game to me of the season was the Redskin one in RFK in the regular season. What to you was your most important game or games to you of the season?
Yeah, my favorite game specifically of the season was the Washington game.
In Washington or the one
in Washington.
Okay.
LT's dominance in that game. Watching him do his iconic dip the shoulder, go right underneath and come over the top, and they just had no answer. And the Giants, when they wanted to, did what they wanted to. There were times where the game but when they wanted to do it, they imposed their will. That was probably my favorite game. My favorite portion of a game or parts of a game that led to it was the second half of the San Francisco game. And there's so many pieces in there that was just really, really good. But
you said the Bavaro play was your favorite play.
Oh, without a doubt.
And Larry, I said the George Martin play was my favorite. Did you have a favorite play? If you had to pick one play, that's your favorite?
Tom Flynn. That was just such a cool play. And it was just a trifecta. He blocked the punt. He recovered the punt with one hand, and he ran it into the end zone.
Does that have something to do with the fact too that he was running right at you?
No, that one was going away.
Oh, I thought it was funny he was running at you. Okay.
I saw him reach up, and I was like, holy, So that one was going away from me, but it was still. I still remember that so well. It was really, really amazing.
Well,
and it was a season filled with so many big plays.
My last comment was was a hell of a ride. It was just a tremendous, and I'll go back and I'll rewatch. I probably won't rewatch the Cardinal game, the 13-6 game, but I'd watch probably just about any game from that season. Maybe not the Dallas.
Just watch the second to last play of the game when the Giants are trying to run out the clock by throwing a bomb.
Yeah.
Tom Flynn brings back memories because he had the touchdown end of the season, touchdown beginning of the season against the Bears. But he did it again in '88 in the first game against Washington. Tom Flynn was a killer on opening nights for the Giants. He was a killer. All right. Well, I mean, this has been great. This has been our recap of the 86 season. Larry, huge thank you for doing this. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. But we've done almost 3 hours. We're going to call it. I'm going to end it like I normally do. And normally I don't tell everybody how I'm going to do it. But when I end it, you don't have to drop off. Just let it run, and then we'll pop back on real quick. So I'm going to end it. We'll catch you guys real soon. But again, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you again soon.
Hey BBI fans, elevate your style with the all-new Inside BBI merchandise. From super soft tees to cozy hoodies and mugs for your morning brew.